Chapter 22. Chapter 22, Wave Superposition Sword Art. The power of the sword art will stack. Several famous experts on the stand could not help being moved. Situ Qingyue continued, this kind of sword art requires a strict application of power. Indeed. Jian Xinhong nodded. The wave superposition swords art needs to constantly store power, so it can be even stronger. Under normal circumstances, if the power can be overlapped 7 times, that is, if the user can demonstrate 7 moves, the sword art will have reached the profound level. This sword art requires 7 moves to reach the profound level. Let's see how many moves this exceptional genius from Sword Marquis Mansion can perform. Situ Qingyue smiled. Everyone was looking forward to her performance. On the arena, Jian Menger's swordsmanship was incredibly smooth, stacking wave after wave. She made her first sword move without an ounce of hesitation. The second, third, and fourth moves were also instantaneous. The fifth, sixth, and seventh quickly followed. The process was smooth without any pause. The spectators could clearly see the power of Jian Menger's sword art become stronger and stronger. That was the result of the power superposing on one another. However, when it came to her 7th sword move, there was no uproar in the drill ground. To use 7 moves, achieving the profound level in the wave superposition sword art, was nothing impressive. However, after the 7th sword move, she adjusted her wrist. Ha! With a cry, she demonstrated the 8th sword move. The sword art had been superposed 8 times and its power had exceeded the limits of first-class sword arts. It's the 8th sword move. Exclamations resounded throughout the drill ground. 7 moves would lead to the profound level of the wave superposition swords art, while the 8th move meant the sword art reached the exceptional level. She's still not done yet, Jian Xinhong said excitedly on the grandstand. Sure enough, Jian Menger did not stop after making her 8th sword move. She was still accumulating power. Is she going to try for the 9th sword move? Under everyone's anticipation, the lovely girl in white wore a solemn expression. She moved her wrist, allowing power to accumulate to an ultimate level. An unexpected dazzling light flashed in her beautiful eyes. Whoosh! She dealt an aggressive split, directly cutting into the air. The 9th move of the wave superposition sword art was a success. Jian Menger finally felt at ease after completing this. She sheathed her sword and stood in place. A commotion broke out on the drill ground. The 9th sword move. She actually did it. Jian Xinhong stared at Jian Menger intensely and said, in the first place, the wave superposition sword art is the highest technique among the 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion. 7 moves are enough for the profound level, what more the 9th move? This girl is still so young but she's capable of demonstrating the sword art to this level. It's truly rare. Situ Qingyue, Yi Xiu, and a few people agreed with this comment. After they learned the mystery of the wave superposition sword art, they immediately understood the difficulties of accumulating the power by 9-fold. Yet Jian Menger, a mere 16-year-old young girl, had accomplished this feat. Shui Hanxin, looks like you've taken in a talented disciple. The girl's talent for cultivation is already incredible, but it looks like her gift in sword principle isn't below any of the peerless talents in your sect, said Bai Chong, glancing at Shui Hanxin. Since she's my disciple, she'll naturally be extraordinary, Shui Hanxin replied calmly. On the grandstand, Jian Lan looked increasingly smug as he listened in on the conversations between the famous experts. Menger, you may leave, he ordered. Yes. Jian Menger bowed lightly towards the grandstand and left the arena under everyone's attention. On her way down, her glance inevitably went to Jian Wushang who was standing at the edge of the drill ground. Jian Wushang, you demonstrated the 9th sword move when you taught me the wave superposition sword art. I can do it as well as you now. Jian Menger's glance carried a hint of pride. Unlike the other Marquis Mansion disciples, Jian Wushang's expression was still without any change when he saw her perform the 9th sword move. It seemed that, In his eyes, her ninth move was just so. Next, Jian Ying. The battle continued, but Jian Menger's performance was simply too brilliant. She had completely overshadowed the rest. The last one, Jian Wushuang. It was finally Jian Wushuang's turn. When they heard his name, many disciples on the drill ground immediately wore odd expressions. Jian Wushuang was the infamous trash of Sword Marquis Mansion. But he had formed his spiritual power 2 months ago and gained victory against Jian Lin, giving others a new impression of him. However, when they heard that he challenged Jian Menger 2 months ago to a duel today, everyone thought he was an overreaching idiot. Now, it was this idiot's turn. Ignoring the attention, Jian Wushuang slowly stepped on the arena. Jian Wushuang. The way Jian Lan glanced at him was clearly different than how he looked at other disciples. "Show us your strongest martial arts or what you're most skilled in," Jian Lan said, his voice somewhat colder. Jian Wushuang prepared his sword, but his gaze was focused on the grandstand right ahead. On the grandstand, those famous experts took little notice of him and were still chattering on about Jian Menger. Only the leisurely Bai Chong smiled at him. Jian Wushuang nodded at him and unsheathed his long sword. Whoosh! The sword light was like the tide, surging forward with great momentum. It made everyone feel as if they had been submerged in the sea, yet carried a deeper meaning at the same time. Ah! Once Jian Wushuang demonstrated his swordsmanship, everyone on the drill ground was surprised. Even the famous experts in the grandstand were amazed. Wave superposition sword art. This little boy is also performing the wave superposition sword art? Situ Qingyue laughed happily. It's the same sword art as Jian Menger. But since hers was too dazzling earlier, this boy wouldn't impress us even if he does as well as her. It doesn't matter even if he performs the 7th or 8th move, Yi Xiu said, laughing. That may not be true, Bai Chong suddenly spoke up. What do you mean? Situ Qingyue and Yi Xiu asked. If Jian Menger can demonstrate the 9th sword move, reaching great heights in the wave superposition sword art, do you think the genius who imparted the sword art to her will be worse off? Bai Chong replied. What? Everyone in the stands was shocked. Mr. Bai Chong, are you saying that little boy taught Jian Menger the wave superposition sword art? Can he also perform the 9th sword move? Situ Qingyue asked, having connected the dots. I don't know how good he is. Let's just watch and see, Bai Chong replied perfunctorily, not saying much. The curiosity of these famous experts in the stands had been piqued, so they immediately concentrated their attention on Jian Wushuang. Chapter 23. Chapter 23, Supreme Level. Transcend it. When everyone saw that Jian Wushuang was also performing the wave superposition sword art, an uproar was raised on the drill ground. He dared to perform the wave superposition sword art. He's digging his own grave. It was not such a big deal if 2 contestants demonstrated the same sword art here. But one of them was a dazzling and peerless genius and the other was the one who challenged that talent 2 months ago. It felt like a subtle provocation for Jian Wushuang to perform the same sword art. Jian Menger had already pushed this sword art to its greatest height. Isn't Jian Wushuang asking for trouble by performing it? That's not for sure. Don't forget it was Jian Wushuang who taught Jian Menger this sword art. So what? Jian Menger demonstrated the 9th sword move. Even if Jian Wushuang can do the same, what can he prove? What's the point to his provocation? All eyes were on Jian Wushuang who was standing on the arena. Many were wearing sneers on their faces. A small part of the disciples in Sword Pavilion wanted to argue for him, but those arguments seemed so weak in front of the Jian Menger who had performed the 9th move of this sword art. Jian Wushuang ignored everyone else. He had long focused all his attention on performing this sword art. Wave superposition sword art was a constant accumulation of power, stacked one over the other, requiring mastery of the most basic sword techniques. The sword light emerged like a tide. There was no hesitation in Jian Wushuang's movements as he performed the first 7 sword moves under everyone's eyes. The sound of the sword slicing the air reverberated with each move. His moves were still smooth after the 7th one and much more coordinated compared to Jian Menger's. The 8th sword move followed the 7th. It's the 8th sword move. People on the drill ground looked at him with earnest attention. But Jian Wushuang did not stop after the 8th sword move and everyone realized he was attempting the 9th sword move. But the 9th move was the peak level of this sword art. Would he be able to do it? Just as the curiosity of the spectators was roused, he was already ready to make his move in the next moment. In an instant, he made another sword move. The 9th sword move. He still demonstrated it naturally and smoothly. Exclamations rang all over the drill ground. Ha! As expected, Bai Chong was right on the mark. This little boy actually managed to perform the 9th sword move, and he did it even more smoothly than Jian Menger. His talent for sword principle is no less than hers, Situ Qingyue said, smiling. The other famous experts in the grandstand nodded to show their agreements. Don't make your assumptions too soon. It's still too early to decide, said Bai Chong, wearing a mysterious smile. Everyone was stunned and instantly turned towards the arena. Instead of sheathing his blade, Jian Wushuang, who had completed the 9th sword move, continued to wield his sword. What? The drill ground fell into silence just then. He had already completed the 9th sword move and had theoretically reached the limit. Yet he did not sheath his blade. What did he want to do? Don't tell me, he's attempting the 10th move. With someone speaking, the whole drill ground burst into exclamations in an instant. The 10th sword move. He's going to perform the 10th sword move. Is there be a 10th move in the wave superposition sword art? Everyone was stunned. That included Jian Menger, whose beautiful eyes were staring at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. Jian Wushuang was indeed continuing this sword art, powers superposed on one another. When it finally reached a certain degree, his face turned steely and he stepped forward to make another sword move without any hesitation. The 10th move. Swish! His sword edge cut through the air, making an ear-splitting explosion. The power of the 10th sword move was evidently far stronger than the 9th sword move. A furor swept the drill ground. Bravo! Situ Qingyue suddenly stood up, his eyes flashing with excitement. Jian Xinhong, your sword marquee mansion really has so many talents. We don't even have to talk about Jian Menger. She's an amazing genius. And you have this boy who has superposed the power 10 times and performed the 10th sword. His talent in sword principle is pretty terrifying. Yi Xiu looked at Jian Xinhong, his words carrying a deeper meaning. Jian Xinhong was pretty shocked himself. He did not know how he should respond. Jian Xinhong, didn't you just say the highest level of this sword art was the 9th move? What about the 10th move? Situ Qingyue asked. Jian Xinhong took a deep breath and said solemnly, indeed, the highest level of the wave superposition sword art is the 9th move. The 10th move is at the supreme level. However, it's too hard to perform it. Since the time Sword Marquee Mansion obtained this sword art, there has only been one person who could perform the 10th move. That was Jian Nantian, the previous sword pavilion master. And this boy is his son. Jian Nantian's son. Situ Qingyue was frozen in shock. Instantly, the famous experts in the grandstand began to look at Jian Wushuang differently. The 10th move. I just knew the boy wouldn't disappoint me. A smile came over Bai Chong's face but disappeared just as quickly. What? Bai Chong blurted out in surprise. Everyone in the grandstand was astonished. Jian Wushuang, whose performance of the 10th move had left everyone astounded, was not done yet. His sword light began to flutter, ready to accumulate power. He was going to attempt the 11th move. That's impossible. Even Jian Xinhong could not help standing up, eyes gleaming with horror. This boy is mad. He's mad. Under the arena, Jianlan was shouting again and again. The 11th move. Bai Chong and the rest in grandstand stood up with surprise. Even the high and lofty Shui Hanxin was stunned and, for the first time, looking at him approvingly. The drill ground sank into a deadly silence. Everyone's eyes were concentrated on Jian Wushuang. He did not pay mind to their attention and closed his eyes, recalling everything his father told him when he taught him this sword art. Shuang, remember that there's no such thing as the supreme level to any sword art. If the 10th move is the supreme level of the wave superposition sword art, all you need to do is to transcend the supreme level. Swish! The ruthless sword light emerged with fury. This sword move seemed capable of splitting the world into two. On the arena, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. A faint smile appeared on his face. I have transcended the supreme level. Father, I've done it. Chapter 24. Chapter 24, Spiritual Power Forms the Foundation. What a shock! Everyone was shocked at the unprecedented movement. The 11th move. He really achieved it. How is that possible? If they had found Jian Menger performing the 9th move of the wave superposition sword art amazing, then they could only describe Jian Wushuang's performance of the 11th move as being unbelievable. It was incredible. He was, without any doubt, incredible. He really pulled off the 11th move. In the grandstand, the esteemed elder Shui Hanxin of Tianyuan sword sect looked stunned. After all, there was not a single person his age capable of doing that, even in her sect. That meant his talent for sword principle was unrivaled by even those in her sect. This young man. The sword marquis mansion master, Jian Xinhong, rose and stared intensely at Jian Wushuang. I'm the mansion master, but I didn't know his gift in sword principle had become this great. Situ Qingyue and the others beside him were beyond shocked. Humph. The organizer of the battle, Jian Lan, snorted and turned around to face the famous experts. Perhaps you all don't know this. Though Jian Wushuang's talent in sword principle is heaven-defying, he's trash that can't even gather spiritual power. Without a corresponding cultivation of spiritual power, what use is his excellent swordsmanship? Oh. You mean the boy can't gather spiritual power? Asked Situ Qingyue and several people, their expressions turning odd. That's right. In Sword Marquis Mansion, everyone knows Jian Wushuang is trash who has been unable to gather spiritual power since he was 12. Even though he succeeded and became a warrior at last, Jian Wushuang lost the golden 4 years for a warrior to lay a solid foundation. So, learning about this, what accomplishments do you think he can achieve in the future? Sneered Jian Lan. Is this true? He just formed his spiritual power 2 months ago. What a pity. Situ Qingyue and several excellent famous experts shook their heads and sighed. In the way of martial arts, the years from 12 to 16 were the most crucial stage, being the years of puberty. It was the best time to lay a solid foundation for cultivation. Once a person missed this golden stage, his achievements in the future would be limited. Of course, this was only applicable to ordinary practitioners, not for defiant cultivators who have cultivated a deviant cultivation like heavenly creation skill. Spiritual power is the foundation of the way of martial arts, while martial arts technique and swordsmanship are external factors. Even if he has excellent swordsmanship, he can't achieve much with weak cultivation of spiritual power. What a pity for this boy. Shui Hanxin glanced Jian Wushuang and shook her head. Even with ordinary cultivation, he has the right to be one of our disciples like Jian Menger with his gift in sword principle. Yet the fact is, he has missed the best time for his cultivation. He has basically no chance of breaking through the spiritual sea realm. He doesn't have the qualification to be an expert. Several famous experts beside her nodded. Though Shui Hanxin's explanation was half-hearted and sloppy, she was right. They could only shake their heads and sigh, feeling sorry for a wasted talent in sword principle. On the drill ground, many disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion had also recovered from the shock and were sighing before long. Jian Wushuang's unparalleled gift in sword principle had given everyone present a shock. But what could it prove? In the world where everyone bowed down to warriors, cultivation of spiritual power was the foundation. The 11th move. Jian Menger fixed a cold glare at the lonely figure descending down the arena. She had long known about Jian Wushuang's gift in sword principle. After her use of the 9th move of the wave superposition sword art, she thought she had finally surpassed him, even if it was just by a hair, but the gap between them was still huge. Either way, the cultivation of spiritual power formed the foundation of the way of martial arts. She vowed to crush his confidence in the second round of the battle. On the grandstand, Jian Lan commented, "Cultivation of spiritual power is the foundation to cultivating martial arts. Our disciples shouldn't neglect the cultivation of spiritual power for martial arts technique. That's simply a fool's way." Jian Lan's words resounded throughout the drill ground. It was obviously meant for Jian Wushuang. "We'll start the second round of the battle next. This round tests your cultivation of spiritual power. Please place the spiritual power gem here." Someone lifted a huge transparent gem, placing it on the arena. The middle of the gem was divided into 10 layers of micro-grooves. The spiritual power gem was used to test cultivation of spiritual power, with 10 layers representing the 10 levels from the first step of the spirit path, up to the exceptional spiritual sea realm. First, Jian Lin. Jian Lin remained the first participant. "Do your best to instill your spiritual power in the spiritual power gem," Jian Lan said. "Yes." Jian Lin nodded, took a deep breath, and put out his palms, displaying his ability. Soon, a cluster of spiritual power flowed into the spiritual power gem. With the infusion of spiritual power, a bright light surged from the spiritual power gem. A dazzling violet light surged from the bottom to the top of the 10 layers of the gem, putting his cultivation of spiritual power at the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path. It did not end there. A fleck of violet light lit the 7th layer. The light was still dim, but the layer was still lit. The 7th layer was lit up. The 7th step of the spirit path. Jian Lin finally broke through the 6th step of the spirit path after so long. People on the drill ground praised him and many of them looked at Jian Lin with envy. When he withdrew his palms, Jian Lin noticed the attention on him. His mood turned better. He had been mortified ever since he was defeated by Jian Wushuang a month ago, but he had now finally recovered some of his dignity. So what if Jian Wushuang has an excellent gift in sword principle? He's probably still in the 6th step now. Jian Lin sneered at Jian Wushuang and stared at him provocatively. But when he saw Jian Wushuang, his anger flared up. "This bastard dares ignore me." Jian Lin raged. He saw how Jian Wushuang had his eyes closed as he leaned against the wall the whole time. His attitude naturally irritated Jian Lin. What he did not know was that Jian Wushuang had never concerned himself with him since the very beginning. Jian Wushuang had never cared about him, not back then and certainly not now. Chapter 25. Chapter 25, Detection of Spiritual Power. Next, Jian Menger. When the lovely girl in a snow-white dress went up the platform once again, the entire drill ground was awed into silence by her beauty. She was still so cold and arrogant. Though Jian Wushuang's performance had suppressed hers, it was not enough to overshadow her brilliance. What truly impressed everyone was her heaven-defying talent for cultivation. She was a mere 16-year-old girl who had achieved the profound spiritual sea realm. This was something unprecedented in the history of Sword Marquis Mansion. Next, the detection of spiritual power would be the perfect opportunity for her to showcase her peerless talent. On the arena, Jian Menger inched her palms closer to the spiritual power gem, gently touching it. Everyone held their breath. Has she really achieved the profound spiritual sea realm? Those famous experts from various spheres of influence were watching with earnest attention. Though they had heard that Jian Menger had such an achievement, this time they would be able to witness it themselves. They would only dare to believe it if they saw it with their own eyes. A harsh violent light lit within the 10-layered spiritual power gem. The light filled the 7th layer without any suspense, then the 8th layer lit up as well. The 8th layer represented the initial spiritual sea realm. It still lit up with that dazzling violet light like the rest of the layers. Then came the 9th layer. It lit up as expected, the light just as brilliant. There were distinctions within the different layers of the spiritual power gem, and they were determined by the brightness of the violet light. Take the previous contestant, Jian Lin, as an example. When he reached the 7th step of Spirit Path, he managed to light up the 7th layer of the spiritual power gem. However, it was very dim as he was still new to the realm. But now, through the infusion of Jian Menger's spiritual power, the 9th layer had lit up with the most brilliant of lights. What did this mean? The peak. The peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. She has already achieved the profound spiritual sea realm and she is not just a newcomer to it. All of a sudden, the drill ground was in an uproar. Good. Very good. On the grandstand, Jian Xinhong rose to his feet and applauded, excitement evident in his eyes. Jian Lan laughed heartily, unable to conceal his joy. She not only achieved the profound spiritual sea realm, but even its peak. Everyone else on the grandstand also looked exceptionally amazed. Their amazement was because, even within the same level, there was a tremendous difference between the early stages and the peak of it. It would take an ordinary warrior at least several years to accumulate enough spiritual power to achieve the profound spiritual sea realm. For some, it may take even longer. Yet Jian Menger was only 16 years old. It was already unbelievable enough that she had achieved the profound spiritual sea realm at that age, never mind reaching the peak. Everyone felt like they were in a daze. Jian Menger. On the drill ground, numerous disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion were staring at the peerless and beautiful person on the platform. Besides Jian Wushuang, none of them had any desire to compete against her. The chosen one. The most beautiful one. It was none other than Jian Menger. Bai Chong squinted and said, "Shui Hanxin, you've really accepted a great disciple. For her to achieve the peak at 16 years old, she really has an extraordinary talent for cultivation. She's not bad." Shui Hanxin nodded, smiling. This girl does have an extraordinary talent for cultivation. Even among the many talented disciples in my Tianyuan sword sect, she's among the best. With my guidance, it won't be a problem for her to achieve gold core before turning 20. If she's willing to work hard and has good luck, perhaps another peak existence will come out of my sect. A peak existence? Everyone was stunned. Elder Shui, are you saying that Jian Menger will be able to achieve the Yin-Yang Void Realm in the future? Jian Xinhong seemed somewhat excited. No one doubted that Jian Menger was capable of forming a gold core before turning 20. However, the Yin-Yang Void Realm was truly the peak of cultivation. Even among the powerful Tianyuan sword sect, there was only a handful who had achieved it. Within Bahui Commandery, there was not even one. Was there any hope for Jian Menger to achieve it in the future? With her talent, nothing is impossible as long as she's willing to work hard, Shui Hanxin replied placidly. Though she sounded indifferent, it was difficult for the audience to calm themselves down. On the arena, Jian Menger was being watched by everyone, but her eyes were directed at Jian Wushuang. Her gaze turned chilly and she said to him, "Jian Wushuang, I've warned you. I'll let you feel complete devastation in this battle today. You're not qualified to surpass me in your entire life. Can you see it now?" Leaning on the corner, Jian Wushuang raised his head with his hands folded. His eyes turned as acute as electricity when they met Jian Menger's. Though no actual conversation took place, he could understand what she wanted to say through her eyes. The peak of the profound spiritual sea realm? Very good. Things will be more interesting this way. He touched his parched lips, his eyes darkening as a fire raged within him. The battle continued, yet compared to Jian Menger's results, the cultivation of spiritual power of the other disciples seemed even dimmer than a firefly's light. The last one, Jian Wushuang. It's your turn. Jian Lan called, voice cold. Leaning on the corner, Jian Wushuang rolled his eyes and slowly made his ways towards the arena. His steps were slow as he put his foot one after another, attracting everyone's attention. All eyes were on him, including the famous experts. The most eye-grabbing people in this battle were doubtlessly Jian Menger and him. In the first round of the battle earlier, Jian Wushuang shocked everyone with the 11th move of the wave superposition sword art. Though no one had any expectations for him in this second round, no one dared to belittle him anymore at the very least. He's up on the arena. Watching Jian Wushuang walk towards the platform, a smile appeared on Jian Menger's face. You achieved the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path a month ago. Now let's see how much progress you've made. Show me what you've achieved during these so-called 2 months. Chapter 26. Chapter 26, A Frightening Battle. Jian Wushuang became the focus on the drill ground. I heard this boy achieved the peak of the 6th step as early as a month ago. I wonder if he has reached the 7th step yet. Achieving the 7th step in a month? Ridiculous. The way I see it, he's probably still at the peak of the 6th step. Though his cultivation is considered decent even among us disciples here, he's still far beneath Jian Menger. If he challenges her without achieving the 7th step, then he's a fool. Even if he's somehow lucky enough to achieve it, challenging her who has achieved the profound spiritual sea realm is just bringing disgrace on his own head. The other disciples started discussing among themselves in whispers. Jian Wushuang eventually stopped in front of the spiritual power gem in the arena. Looking at it, he took a deep breath. 2 months' worth of earnest cultivation, he recalled the past 2 months where he dared not even spend a minute relaxing. He stayed in the cultivating room and endured the massive pressure, continuously turning the torment into something he could be proud of. In the gladiator arena, he risked his life to join the challenge so he could get his hands on all the first-class spirit-cultivating pills he needed. In Nine Wolves Mountain, he fought against the bloody lion and absorbed a whole pool of primordial spiritual liquid. He had spent 2 months frantically cultivating and now it was time to show them all his hard work. Everyone looks down on me. They all think I'm overreaching to challenge Jian Menger. In that case, you all better open your eyes wide and watch carefully. With a heat gleamed in his eyes, he touched the spiritual power gem with his hands. Using heavenly creation skill, the spiritual power began to pour out from within. Buzz! A dazzling violet light emerged from the spiritual power gem almost instantaneously. The 6th level of the 10-layered spiritual power gem lit up after Jian Wushuang's spiritual power flowed into it. The same brilliant light marked the 7th step of the spirit path. The 7th layer lit up. The 7th step of the spirit path. He actually achieved it. Cries of surprises resounded throughout the drill ground. Amidst the crowd was Jian Lin, who had gone pale. This time, he had reached the 7th step of the spirit path as well and thought he had finally caught up to Jian Wushuang. The constant flow of Jian Wushuang's spiritual power sparked the violet light that filled the 7th layer of the spiritual power gem, which was truly glaring. And it was still going. After the 7th layer, the violet light instantly lit up the 8th. The 8th level? Jian Lin's eyes widened in shock. The 8th layer represented the initial spiritual sea realm. The bright violet light was still going, inching towards the 9th layer. It's just as I thought. The spiritual power gem tests the cultivation of spiritual power based on its force. Though I haven't achieved the spiritual sea realm yet, I've reached the peak 8th heaven of the divine path in the heavenly creation skill. That's equivalent to the peak of the initial spiritual sea realm. The strength of the heavenly creation skill is far stronger than the similar ones. And the 9th level, Jian Wushuang's gaze turned sharp and he shouted. Light it up. Buzz. Light abruptly filled the 9th layer of the spiritual power gem. That meant the layer that represented the profound spiritual sea realm was lit. Impossible. On the arena, Jianlan was the first to make noise. There was no trace of any smugness on his face, only a distorted expression that looked almost mad. Jianlan, earlier you said this boy hadn't even gathered his spiritual power 2 months ago, said Situ Qingyue, looking directly at him. Aye. Jianlan could not find any words to retort. The 9th layer? How's that possible? Jian Xinhong's eyes were round. The profound spiritual sea realm. He actually achieved the profound spiritual sea realm? How's that possible? It must be a lie. A lie. It's completely impossible. 2 months ago, he couldn't even gather spiritual power. Everyone had gone mad. The whole drill ground had completely gone mad. The 9th level. There was finally a change in Jian Menger's arrogant expression that she had maintained on her beautiful face since the beginning of the competition. An unprecedented fearful expression crept onto her face. Fright. Yes, even Jian Menger was shocked. She was a peerless genius who had started her cultivation at the age of 12. For years since then, she had achieved the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. Her achievement was remarkable. How could Jian Wushuang compare? Everyone knew Jian Wushuang was once trash who could not even gather spiritual power. Everyone knew he was just an ordinary man without a trace of spiritual power 2 months ago. Everyone thought him wanting to challenge her today was the world's biggest joke. But now, who dared to laugh at him whose spiritual power gem had lit up the 9th layer, representing the profound spiritual sea realm? Who dared to say Jian Wushuang did not qualify to challenge her? If people had found Jian Wushuang lamentable after he had surprisingly pulled off the 11th move of the wave superposition sword art in the first round, then the cultivation of spiritual power he had just presented was truly shocking. Genius. Monster. These 2 words inevitably appeared in everyone's minds. Jian Menger started cultivating at 12 and achieved the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm at merely 16. She could already be considered a peerless talent. Yet Jian Wushuang had only spent 2 months to go from an ordinary person to someone in the profound spiritual sea realm. What was he if not a monster? And just then, the person who everyone regarded as a monster had slowly withdrawn his palm. With his dark pupils, he swept everyone with his gaze, carrying a hint of disdain. Standing high up on the arena, Jian Wushuang looked down upon the disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion. Each of them who met his eyes could not help bowing their heads. On the entire drill ground, there was only one person who dared to meet his gaze, all while carrying a trace of stubbornness. It was Jian Menger. Jian Wushuang's gaze finally landed on her. There was no need for any words. In that moment, their burning battle intent to fight had risen to the surface. Jian Menger, get the fuck up here. His cold growl was akin to a thunderbolt, resonating through heaven and earth. The entire drill ground instantly became ablaze with excitement. Chapter 27. Chapter 27, Summit Battle. Jian Menger, get the fuck up here. A chilly shrill cry echoed, resounding through the drill ground for a long time. A beautiful girl in a long, snow-white robe raised her head, promptly leaping onto the stage with one step. Standing on the stage, less than 10 meters away from each other, 2 figures were on a warpath. There was an intense feeling of confrontation that you do not sense any other time. The long sword on Jian Wushuang's back was removed from the sheath and a vibration of sword essence like the rolling tide radiated from it. As the cold sword edge directly pointed at Jian Menger, without the slightest trace of emotion, Jian Wushuang coldly said, "As I said 2 months ago, I have come to find you today. The fight between us is inevitable. It had to come to an end." Jian Menger's face was stone cold as she stood there with her snow-white robe blowing. The power of her peak of the profound spiritual sea realm was completely released. Jian Wushuang, I don't know how you increased your strength in just 2 months. Anyway, I still believe that the winner takes all. Since you are so desperate to fight with me, then bring it on. The brief talk led the atmosphere to an elevated level immediately. Oh, I see. There was an uproar of excitement and expectation rising in the area around the drill ground. It seemed that the disciples of Sword Marquee Mansion were on the brink of madness, waiting to witness how things would unfold. This would be an eye-catching duel. What an exciting turn of events. It was universally acknowledged that a 16-year-old teenager, considered to be a super genius, top of the list, had reached the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. The other one who was buried in oblivion, amazed people with their spiritual power, on par with the profound spiritual sea realm, which was acquired within 2 months. The battle between them, even those famous experts among the audience were looking forward to watching the fight between them. It was the summit battle between two talents. In fact, the people who lived in Sword Marquee Mansion thought Jian Wushuang's challenge to Jian Menger was a joke and brought disgrace on his own head. Now, after 2 rounds of battle, no one dared to say it was wishful thinking. According to the sword principle, someone who cultivated the wave superposition sword art to the 11th move was definitely a genius. According to the cultivation of spiritual power, he lit up the 9th level of the spiritual power gem, also equivalent to the profound spiritual sea realm. So they were neck and neck in this battle. He had the qualification to challenge Jian Menger. In addition, it was hard to say who would be the victor. Ladies and gentlemen, you see these two. Who's better than the other? Bai Chong asked with a smile. It is hard to say. Situ Qingyue spoke first. In cultivation of spiritual power, Jian Menger had reached the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm, which was slightly better than Jian Wushuang. In regards to swordsmanship, Jian Wushuang gained the upper hand. They were well matched, making it hard to judge their true strength. I agree. Yi Xiu nodded his head. Although cultivation of spiritual power is a fundamental step in the process of practicing martial arts, the strength of martial arts technique is an important factor that could also determine the outcome, considering the small disparity in their cultivation. By virtue of their swordsmanship, Jian Wushuang and Jian Menger could totally brawl with each other, and the outcome will be unpredictable. Shui Hanxin, what do you think? Bai Chong suddenly looked at her, beside him. I bet Menger will win. Shui Hanxin said following. Oh, you are confident you are in your disciple? Bai Chong said with the corner of his lip raised. Bai Chong, did you just notice? Shui Hanxin glanced at Bai Chong, laughing as she said, that little guy called Jian Wushuang, although he lit up the spiritual power gem during the detection of spiritual power, I could see that he barely reached it. So I am sure that he hasn't reached the profound spiritual sea realm. I think his cultivation is between the peak of the initial spiritual sea realm and the profound spiritual sea realm. Indeed. Bai Chong just noticed this, nodding. Moreover, we all know that this little guy had not gathered spiritual power 2 months ago. Now, 2 months have passed, his spiritual cultivation has unexpectedly increased so much, so I think there are bound to be many external factors. Shui Hanxin said plainly. For example, regardless of the consequences, he swallowed pills or treasures to enhance his cultivation by force. But the enhancement would lead him to collapse radically. Not only is his chance of becoming an expert in the future very slim, he also won't be able to utilize 100% of his strength. His performance will be at a mere 20% or 30% at best. People in the spectators' stand frowned upon hearing these words. Indeed, they also thought of this possibility. After all, it was inconceivable that his cultivation of spiritual power increased so quickly. It made no sense to say that he did not use some pills or natural treasures. However, they did not know that Jian Wushuang was a deviant cultivator. Therefore, his training could not be judged by common sense. Of course, apart from these two things, the most important part is that I have absolute confidence in my disciple. I know my disciple better than anyone else. It is impossible to find a talent of the same age who can beat my disciple in Sword Marquee Mansion, Shui Hanxin said nonchalantly with a look of absolute confidence. It is really subjective, but I rather think the little guy called Jian Wushuang could win. Bai Chong said and laughed. Since Mr. Bai Chong thinks so, let's wait and see. Shui Xinhan said with an indifferent smile. Look, these two little guys are fighting with each other. Yi Xiu said abruptly from the spectators' stand. Everyone instantaneously turned their eyes to the stage. Jian Menger was the first to attack. As a trace of killing intent burst out from triple kill sword as Jian Menger took a huge step and swung the long sword with an irresistible force. Sword tide. When the long sword suddenly slashed out, it was like the rolling tide sweeping over the area. Sword tide was the most terrifying move of the ceaseless waterflow sword art, and its sweeping wave was the essence of this trick. Under normal circumstances, this move, if mastered to the profound level, could produce 6 layers. But at this moment, Jian Menger's wave swept out with 8 layers. It's ridiculous. Jian Wushuang chuckled and caught the waves with his sword, a very common sword, dissolving the 8 layers of sword essence without any effort when he touched them by taking advantage of their force. Then he made a huge stride toward his opponent. Whoosh! A tide-like sword light was released, creating waves in the area. Jian Wushuang also performed the move, Sword Tide. But when the sword art was performed, the rolling waves of sword essence burst out with 12 layers in an instant. Chapter 28. Chapter 28, Superior Swordsmanship. Amazing. One stroke was enough to dispel her sword art. How did he do that? His sword arts are so strong. The first fight between the two brought about bursts of exclamations throughout the drill ground. Jian Wushuang's understanding of swordsmanship is much better than we ever imagined. The famous experts on the stands also felt amazed. They all had broader horizons. Naturally, they could see that Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was extraordinary. The sword stroke he displayed before seemed simple, but in fact, it required perfect use of the sword art's power as well as a high comprehension of basic swordsmanship. Next, Jian Wushuang used the same sword tide and released 12 layers of sword essence, which astonished everyone. After all, Jian Menger tried her best but only brought about 8 layers of sword essence. This tremendous difference immediately demonstrated the big gap between their skills. Fuck off. After an effeminate shout, Jian Menger attacked straight ahead indignantly, with her towering long sword. This simple action, carrying an incomparably strong power, was filled with an awe-inspiring righteousness. A magnificent spiritual power gathered together and then rushed out all at once, colliding with the onrushing sword essence wave released by Jian Wushuang. Tianyuan sword skill. While watching from the stands, Bai Chong's pupils immediately shrank and he cast a glance at Shui Hanxin, then whispered, "No wonder you're so confident. Your baby disciple has already practiced Tianyuan sword skills." Shui Hanxin smiled faintly but stayed silent. Tianyuan sword skill, the supreme sword art that was practiced in Tianyuan sword sect, was far stronger than various sword arts in Sword Marquis Mansion. The degree of strength of cultivation level represented the degree of pureness, precision and momentum of its spiritual power. The overall strength of Jian Menger, who practiced the Tianyuan sword skill, was definitely far stronger than ordinary people at the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. That's why Jian Menger could overcome 20 movements when she competed with the 4 great elders of Sword Pavilion by virtue of the profound spiritual sea realm. The 12 waves of sword essence were scattered Jian Menger's sword strike, then streaks of sword shadow burst out from one of Jian Menger's hands. Each sword was startlingly fast. Aurora sword art. Jian Wushuang slightly raised the corners of his mouth, followed by a sudden cold voice, "I told you before, even though the Aurora sword art pursues extreme speed, blindly increasing your speed will affect the coordination and coherence between the sword arts. But obviously, you didn't take my advice. Not to mention that your sword art. It's too slow. Too slow." These words resounded on the drill ground and immediately made all of the disciples of Marquis Mansion stunned. After all, in their view, Jian Menger's sword art was fast enough. They were too fast to be seen with the naked eye. In only an instant, a series of sword shadows rushed out. Dozens of sword shadows were displayed by her, but Jian Wushuang withstood them all. Too slow. Too slow. Jian Wushuang resisted the swords while shaking his head at the same time. It was clear that he could easily withstand these swords. Jian Menger bit the bullet and tried her best to increase the speed. However, even though she displayed the Aurora sword art with her full power, she couldn't even touch Jian Wushuang's clothes. "I'll show you the real Aurora sword art now," Jian Wushuang said coldly. After saying that, Shua, an awesome sword shadow, much faster than that of Jian Menger, rushed out at once. They were quick like lightning, and the consecutive sword strikes were coordinated and coherent. Too fast. Oh my God. Lots of cheering erupted on the drill ground. They felt amazed by the speedy swordsmanship of Jian Menger. As for Jian Wushuang's speed with the Aurora sword art, they truly felt it was unbelievable. It was so fast that people couldn't see it clearly. How can it be so fast? Jian Menger was greatly frightened. Seeing the overlapping sword shadows sweeping towards her like lightning, she immediately used the boulder sword art, which was a special defensive sword art among the 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion, to resist with her all strength. Clang! 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 After many successive clashes, Jian Menger was obviously flustered. Jian Wushuang's sword art was so fast that she couldn't withstand them, and now she was forced into an embarrassing situation. After the sword light radiated for only a few moments, the sword art that was falling like torrential rain suddenly stopped. 18 breaths. Forced to the edge of the tower, Jian Menger stared in front of her. At Jian Wushuang. She calculated the breaths while she tried to resist Jian Wushuang's sword art. After Jian Wushuang finished the entire Aurora sword art, it was only 18 breaths. While she needed at least 37 breaths to display the whole sword art. This meant that Jian Wushuang's speed with this sword art was more than twice as fast as her, and it was obvious that Jian Wushuang displayed it more coherently and with more coordination. It was too fast for her to resist. Jian Menger took a glance at the sleeve of her robe. 2 holes from a sword edge could be seen clearly, exposing her white skin, which made her feel shameful. Bastard! With an angry shout, Jian Menger attacked him directly with triple kill sword, fiercely. Drifting snow sword art. One of the 18 first-class sword arts Sword Pavilion. It's ridiculous. Jian Wushuang sneered, easily facing this sword art. Then he used the drifting snow sword art in a more overbearing and aggressive manner. Just as the old saying goes, serve them with the same sauce. No matter what sword art Jian Menger displayed, Jian Wushuang resisted it easily at first and then returned it in a tougher, more mature, and perfect manner. Superior swordsmanship. He completely surpassed her in sword arts. Jian Menger's swordsmanship was already good enough for her to reach the profound level in all 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion. But now, in front of Jian Wushuang, her sword arts were just like tricks played by little children. The gap was so big. The gap of swordsmanship between the two was even bigger than we expected. Looking down, Situ Qingyue solemnly said, Jian Menger has good swordsmanship, but Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship is much better. It's hard to imagine that a 16-year-old boy could have such impressive swordsmanship. Jian Xinhong, in Sword Marquis Mansion, are you the only person who has better swordsmanship than this little guy? Yi Xiu looked toward Jian Xinhong. As the Sword Marquis Mansion master, Jian Xinhong had a full understanding of the situation regarding Sword Marquis Mansion. Hearing Yi Xiu's words at this moment, he couldn't help nodding in agreement. As for swordsmanship, merely in Sword Marquis Mansion, he was the only one that was better than Jian Wushuang. Chapter 29. Chapter 29, Unworthy. Shui Hanxin, if it continues on like this, your dear disciple will be defeated, said Bai Chong with a smile. They are still fighting, and the little guy called Jian Wushuang only has a small advantage. It is too early to say that my disciple will lose, right? Shui Hanxin said with a complacent expression as if everything was already in the bag. Then continue to watch. Bai Chong frowned and said nothing more. In the arena, eye-catching sword light flashed. Jian Menger had successively performed many strikes using first-class sword arts of the Sword Pavilion, which were incredibly formidable. However, Jian Wushuang not only countered her attacks, he also countered them with superior sword moves in response. The gap in swordsmanship was too large. Although Jian Menger had an absolute advantage when using her spiritual power, it was difficult to utilize this at the moment, as her strength could not be channeled through her attacks. Her arrogance and confidence were completely suppressed by Jian Wushuang. 2 months ago, you said that you and I were from 2 different worlds and that there was an insurmountable gap between us. You looked down on me. In your eyes, I was trash, a wretch that could not even gather spiritual power. Just before the start of this duel, you said again that in this fight, you would let me face complete despair due to your absolutely dominant strength. You have said so much and been so arrogant. But now, Jian Menger, is your strength only to this extent? Come at me with your strongest attack, or, could it be that with your current strength, you do not have the qualifications to deserve my attention? With eyes gleaming like lightning, Jian Wushuang stared at Jian Menger, who was embarrassed by the pressure from his swordsmanship. These harsh words which were spoken echoed throughout the whole drill ground, causing an uproar in the entire ground. Jian Menger clenched her white teeth tightly, and she involuntarily looked at Shui Hanxin, who was in the stand. She sensed her gaze on her and nodded toward her slightly. Jian Menger immediately understood Shui Hanxin's plan through this signal. Jian Wushuang, I know that your gift in sword principles is unique, and I never thought of fighting with you based on swordsmanship. But today, I will let you know how big the world is. You, observe closely. With a groan, an awe-inspiring righteous aura burst out of her body, while holding her sword in one hand with the sword tip pointed at Jian Wushuang. Strong and formidable sword essence spread out slowly. The sword essence was extremely vigorous, grand and magnificent. This is, Bai Chong, who had been smiling in the stand, was surprised, and a hint of fright flashed in his eyes. Boundless Universe Sword Art, one of the 4 ultimate swords arts of the Tianyuan sword sect. Bai Chong looked at Shui Hanxin with gloomy countenance, and coldly said, Shui Hanxin, did you teach her the Boundless Universe sword art? Menger is my disciple. Is there anything wrong with teaching her this? Shui Hanxin sneered. The Boundless Universe sword art, as one of the 4 ultimate sword arts of the Tianyuan sword sect, was an absolute peak-tier first-class sword art. Compared to the 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion, it was quite a bit stronger. It was because Jian Menger had cultivated this boundless heaven sword art, combined with her higher spiritual power cultivation compared to Jian Wushuang's, that Shui Hanxin had absolute confidence in Jian Menger from beginning to end. This is boundless heaven sword art. There is no longer any suspense in this duel. Situ Qingyue sighed at the side. Winner, Jian Menger must be the winner. Her cultivation of spiritual power is much higher than that of Jian Wushuang. Together with this top-tier first-class sword art, it is impossible for Jian Wushuang to defeat her, definitely impossible. Yi Xiu said as well. Victory. That little guy called Jian Wushuang will lose. There was a collective groan from the stands. Well done, Menger, excellent. At this moment, Jian Lan was clasping his hands full of excitement. Hearing the comments that Jian Menger would win the duel coming from the famous experts next to him, he looked ecstatic. Only Bai Chong, who stared at Shui Hanxin with a frosty gaze, coldly said, although Jian Menger is your disciple, after all, she has neither really entered into Tianyuan sword sect, nor had an entry ceremony, while you have already taught her the boundless heaven sword art without authorization. Although you are an elder of Tianyuan sword sect, and it is normal for you to have some privileges. But, to want to win only by virtue of the boundless heaven sword art? I don't think so. Oh. Shui Hanxin was surprised as she looked at Bai Chong, with a condescending expression. Jian Menger is using the boundless heaven sword art. Could there be any suspense in this duel? On the battlefield, the condition of Jian Menger had reached the peak at this moment. That vast sword essence was at an awe-inspiring stage. Such frightful sword essence indicated that the sword strike that was about to be displayed by Jian Menger would be world-shaking in power. Such strong sword essence, I didn't think that Jian Menger would have this much power. The expression of Jian Wushuang was gloomy. This sword essence is amazing. It is not from my sword marquee mansion, so it seems that her great master taught her that. Good, I guess that makes sense. Jian Wushuang's eyes were hot. Jian Wushuang, take my strike. Remember, it is called Sword River. Jian Menger said coldly. Sword River. Jian Wushuang's eyes were fiery, and strong battle intent rose up from his heart immediately. Come on, let this attack determine the outcome. It won't let you down. The awe-inspiring aura from the body of Jian Menger had reached the ultimate limit. At this moment, she held the triple kill sword with both hands together and raised the sword into the air. Heaven and earth seemed to pause for a moment, while the surroundings fell silent instantly. Go to hell. Finally, Jian Menger powerfully hacked down with her long sword. Swoosh! A bright and dazzling sword light burst forth, cutting through the air and leaving an eye-catching sword river flowing through the void. Gorgeous and beautiful. Anyone who saw this sword river would be completely immersed and awestruck. However, when the sword river flowed towards Jian Wushuang, he suddenly closed his eyes and thought of many unexpected scenes. All these scenes were about the time he and Jian Menger spent over the last 4 years from day to night. Once, I dreamed that I could be with you forever. We would get married and even have children. You were my closest partner, someone I truly loved. I was willing to give you everything, even my life. But now, this illusion has been broken. The next sword will determine victory or defeat, as well as completely end the relationship between you and me. With this sword, I will tell you that. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, with a flat and cold voice resounding through the sky. There are many people who are qualified to look down on me in this world, but you are unworthy. Zip! Ice-cold sword light flashed at once. Blood Shadow, the first move of the anonymous sword arts. Chapter 30. Chapter 30, Best in the World, the Formless Sword Arts. The two streams of sword light formed a stunningly beautiful sword river. One of the lights was majestic. The other was cold and dazzling, as well as fleeting. Both sword lights were frighteningly powerful but very different. If one would describe Jian Menger's sword river as a colossal giant, capable of overpowering anything in the world, then Jian Wushuang's sword light was akin to an omnipresent assassin, lurking in the void like a king of assassination. A colossal giant had the ability to overpower the world. As an assassin and the king of assassination, was there any need for him to compete with her? It was naturally hopeless. Swish! The fleeting sword light resurfaced once again, bypassing the long and splendid stream of Jian Menger's sword river and appearing in front of her. Before she could even react, the sword light swept over her wrist. Blood splattered and the triple kill sword fell on the ground. Jian Wushuang was already in front of Jian Menger, the long sword in his hand pointing at her throat, stopping less than half a centimeter away from her skin. It was so close that she shivered from the coldness of the steel, her beautiful face finally turning pale for the first time. Time seemed to have come to a standstill. Everyone stared at the scene unfolding on the arena in disbelief. Has he really defeated her? Jian Menger lost. Oh my God! A thundering uproar swept the drill ground as everyone exclaimed loudly. Over on the grandstand. Impossible! Shui Hanxin was the first on her feet. She had been so confident in her disciple's victory. Changing expressions fleeted across her face. How could it be? Jian Lan was completely stunned. He could not believe what had just happened. Jian Menger, who uses the boundless heaven sword art, was defeated. The famous experts in the grandstand exchanged looks. They could see their shock reflected in each other's eyes. Earlier, they had all thought Jian Menger would win. There was no suspense in the confrontation, but the result was a slap in their faces. Anonymous sword art. Jian Wushuang used anonymous sword art. Jian Xinhong's eyes brightened. Anonymous sword art? Everyone turned to him. That's the supreme sword art of our sword marquee mansion. Only the masters are qualified to understand it, and only 3 sword pavilion masters have truly comprehended it. I didn't think this boy would be able to comprehend it. His father must have taught him, Jian Xinhong said excitedly. It must be his father that taught him, Jian Xinhong said excitedly. It was no wonder he was so excited. After all, anonymous sword art was so advanced that it was incredible for anyone to be able to comprehend it. What anonymous sword art? Is it even comparable to our Tianyuan sword sect's boundless heaven sword art? Asked Shui Hanxin, her expression turning cold. Shui Hanxin, you're being ignorant about this. Even if your Tianyuan sword sect's boundless heaven sword art is great, it doesn't mean there are only a few sword arts that can rival it. Take the anonymous sword art as an example. It's more powerful than the boundless heaven sword art. Bai Chong sneered, staring at Shui Hanxin. If you haven't heard of the anonymous sword art, I'm sure you know it as the formless sword art. Formless sword art? The best sword art in the world, formless sword art? Shui Hanxin was startled. You're saying what Jian Wushuang demonstrated was the formless sword art? That's right. The corners of Bai Chang's mouth lifted and he nodded. The famous formless sword art contains 9 different movements. The terrifying ones being the last 3, but they have been long lost. The middle 3 are rare and valuable. They're hard to get even if your sect is willing to pay a hefty price. The first 3 movements of the formless sword art are more common. Even a second-rate power, much weaker than your sect, could get their hands on them as long as they're willing to pay. As far as I know, the first sword marquee mansion master, 200 years ago, paid a heavy price for the first 3 movements, which make up the anonymous sword art. The one Jian Wushuang used was the first move of the formless sword art, Blood Shadow. Blood Shadow. Everyone could not help recalling the move Jian Wushuang had demonstrated on the arena. The sword moved like a ghost, and when the sword edge fell there was a flicker of red. It was like a red shadow, thus the technique was named Blood Shadow. It's a terrifying technique. The famous experts in the grandstand were all amazed. Shui Hanxin, your disciple lost this battle. Bai Chong said. Shui Hanxin's expression turned steely. Lost? She really lost the battle. On the arena, Jian Wushuang's long sword remained near Jian Menger's neck. If he moved his palm even just slightly closer, he could kill her at once. Jian Wushuang, are you happy now? If you're still not satisfied, just kill me directly. She was smiling, but it was an incredibly tragic smile. He looked at her momentarily without speaking before putting down his long sword. He bent over to pick up the discarded sword on the ground and stroked the metal slowly. Triple kill sword. There was a hint of surprise in her eyes when she saw him pick up the triple kill sword. When she raised her head to look at him, cold words resounded by her ears. 2 months ago, I told you the sword pavilion will always belong to sword pavilion. It'll always belong to my father and I. Don't even dream about getting a piece of it. I'll kill anyone who tries to steal it. You only have yourself to blame for what happened today. Myself to blame? A stunned Jian Menger had become a little whiter when she heard this. Her smile was self-deprecating and her eyes were wet. Just then. You only have yourself to blame. That's a fine phrase. A majestic, booming voice reverberated throughout the drill ground unexpectedly. Everyone turned and finally noticed the cold-faced young man by Shui Hanxin's side. The young man carried a long sword and had always stood quietly beside Shui Hanxin. He had not spoken since the beginning, but his brows were now uplifted. In 2 quick steps, he came up to the arena and his voice echoed in the air. I'm Emo of the Tianyuan Sword Sect. Do you dare to fight me? Chapter 31. Chapter 31, Seize the Spirit of the World. Pang! The indifferent young man's heavy landing shook the arena and made the floor crack. Senior brother Emo. Jian Menger looked at him. What are you doing? Junior sister. Emo shot a glance at Jian Menger. Great Master and I are here today to see your excellent presentation for the campaign of Sword Pavilion Master. Instead, you're being humiliated on stage. As a great master, she cannot help you in respect of her status. However, as your senior brother, I cannot just stand by and watch. Emo looked at Jian Wushuang again after that, and said in a deep voice, Jian Wushuang, as a man, does it give you a sense of achievement to bully a woman? A woman? Jian Wushuang could not help laughing. I couldn't tell she was a woman when she taught me an unforgettable lesson 2 months ago, that strength mattered the most in the world. Well, you're right. Emo nodded, hummed in a cold voice, as you said, only strength matters in this world. But I will tell you with confidence that my junior sister, as well as the disciples of the great master, are not easy to bully. I will let you know that you are just a narrow-minded person and a contemptible scoundrel. As the voice fell, a strong spiritual power was emitted from Emo. The spiritual power was much stronger than the peak profound spiritual sea realm emitted by Jian Menger. Exceptional spiritual sea realm. How could Emo already be an expert in the exceptional spiritual sea realm? How old is he? He looks about our age. How could his cultivation of spiritual power be so high? It was already surprising that Jian Menger achieved the profound spiritual sea realm at 16 years old, not to mention her senior brother. The drill ground was immediately filled with exclamations. Shui Hanshin, there really are a lot of geniuses in the Tianyuan Sword Sect. Bai Chong looked at Shui Hanshin meaningfully. The reason why my Tianyuan Sword Sect is strong is that there are plenty of generations of genius disciples attracted by our rich resources that keep gathering there. Menger is only at the top in talent, but she is not the strongest, Shui Hanshin said. But your disciples' behavior goes a bit too far, right? The moment Jian Menger was defeated, he jumped out. If Jian Wushuang was defeated, would all of your top disciples in Tianyuan Sword Sect jump out to help him? Bai Chong said in a cold voice. So what? There are indeed many apprentices in my Tianyuan Sword Sect. What's more, he is also 16, the same age as Jian Wushuang. It is fair for the two of them to fight. Shui Hanshin said and laughed. That is different. Bai Chong shook his head and said, although they are at the same age, the cultivation they have is rather different. While your disciple gets top resources from the Tianyuan Sword Sect, including cultivation methods in swordsmanship, guidance from experts at the peak of the Gold Core realm, as well as from some stronger disciples in the Tianyuan Sword Sect. Jian Wushuang learned all this by himself. How could they be the same? Then who is to blame? It is he himself. Looking pale, Shui Hanshin shot a glance at Bai Chong and spoke in a low voice, Bai Chong, Jian Wushuang has nothing to do with you. He is from Sword Marquis Mansion, and you are the supervisor of the gladiator arena. Even the Sword Marquis Mansion master allowed this disciple to jump out. Why are you complaining? Bai Chong, stunned, couldn't help looking at the experts from Sword Marquis Mansion. They were either elders from Red Martial Hall or alchemists from Pill Refining Room, except for Jian Xinhong. But people from Sword Pavilion were not here. People from Red Martial Hall and Pill Refining Room did not support Jian Wushuang. As for Jian Xinhong, he hesitated for a while, however, when he saw the cold complexion on Shui Hanshin, he swallowed his words. Because he could tell that Shui Hanshin was enraged. If he supported Jian Wushuang at this moment, he would offend an elder who had great power in Tianyuan Sword Sect, in the name of Sword Marquis Mansion. So, he chose to swallow his words. Bai Chong couldn't say anything because even people in Sword Marquis Mansion didn't support him. How could he blame an outsider? Spiritual power at the exceptional spiritual sea realm came from Yi Mo on the arena. It made the disciples from the Marquis Mansion feel stressed. Exceptional spiritual sea realm? Jian Wushuang felt surprised. Exceptional spiritual sea realm is a higher level than Jian Menger's. Yi Mo became an apprentice of Shui Hanxin a long time ago. What's more, he has been training in Tianyuan sword sect with cultivation methods and secret sword arts. His swordsmanship must be more excellent than Jian Menger's since his cultivation is much stronger. Jian Wushuang had already tried his best to defeat Jian Menger. As for Yi Mo, he felt very unsure. However, he sensed that he had to fight with Yi Mo when he saw the icy stares of Shui Hanxin and the complicated expressions from everyone around him. I have no right to refuse the fight, yet I never wanted to refuse. So let's begin. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly, showing a little insanity in his slightly narrowed eyes. Soul devouring. Secret skill. The void shook with insanity. Jian Wushuang's body seemed to become a dark hole capable of capturing anything. Natural power from all things of the universe came to him at a surprising speed. As the natural power poured into his body, Jian Wushuang's spirit raged. His cultivation of spiritual power was only at the peak of the 8th heaven of the divine path, almost at the profound spiritual sea realm. However, now his cultivation of spiritual power exceeded the 8th heaven of the divine path into the 9th heaven of the divine path. At the same time, a piercing pain made Jian Wushuang's face contort. Finally, when this soul-devouring secret skill reached the peak, the pain in his body reached its peak too. His cultivation of spiritual power promoted to the 9th heaven of the divine path at that moment. Grinding his teeth tightly, Jian Wushuang's face contorted. The moment he raised his head, a light filled the void. Jian Wushuang spoke with great arrogance and obstination that resounded in the people's hearts. You are Yi Mo from Tianyuan sword sect, right? If you need to be convinced, then I will convince you with my fists. Chapter 32. Chapter 32, Sword-Killing Movement. Bang! Jian Wushuang sparked spiritual power that could match the exceptional spiritual sea realm. Applying the soul-devouring secret skill, his cultivation immediately reached the peak of the 9th heaven of the divine path. His present spiritual power could almost match the profound spiritual sea realm. Because of the advantages of the heavenly creation skill, the peak of the 9th heaven of the divine path had nearly the same power as the peak of the exceptional spiritual sea realm for normal warriors. What happened here? How did his spiritual power become so strong? All those present were in awe. They were wondering how Jian Wushuang had become so strong all of a sudden. However, if they looked under the floor, they would find that all the creatures within 100 meters of Jian Wushuang had died. What? He is actually retaining his strength? Jian Menger, who had retreated to the drill ground, trembled with fright when he saw the aggressive figure from behind. Jian Wushuang's look changed completely. His ruthless eyes were fastened on Yi Mo. He was aware that using the soul-devouring secret skill did great harm to his body, and the pain in his body would grow with each passing minute. He had to end this fight as quickly as possible. Kill! Jian Wushuang's sword and the long sword turned into a ghastly force. Ping! Sword light shone, cold and glaring. It was still the first move of the anonymous sword art, Blood Shadow. Jian Wushuang defeated Jian Menger in a single move. The extraordinary speed of the sword art amazed everyone, and the present speed was obviously faster because of Jian Wushuang's growing cultivation. It's too fast to think about. Yi Mo hummed with remarkable noble spirit, and a magnificent sword light appeared. What Yi Mo used was the Boundless Heaven sword art. But Yi Mo used the Boundless Heaven's sword art in a much more flexible manner than Jian Menger. This was because Jian Menger had just begun to train in the Boundless Heaven sword art. Yi Mo, grew up studying the sword art in the Tianyuan sword sect. They obviously had a different level of understanding towards the sword art. It was still a fight between the giant of heaven and earth and the king of assassination. However, Jian Wushuang's first move, Blood Shadow, met the magnificent sword light instead of going around it, causing these two strong forces to erupt. It was apparent that the advantage of Jian Wushuang's first move, Blood Shadow, was its amazing speed. But it still fell behind the boundless heaven sword art in terms of strength and power. After the collision of these two swords, the cold and shining sword light darkened quickly with the overwhelming crush following. It didn't work. Jian Wushuang was disappointed. The advantage of your sword art lies in the speed, but it lacks in strength. My junior sister has been practicing the boundless heaven sword art for only a short time, thus she didn't have a deep understanding of it. This caused her defeat. I am much better. Yi Mo's look was ruthless, and he said in a low voice, Jian Wushuang, you must think your sword art is very swift, yes? I will show you what real speed is. Yi Mo turned into a flowing light as soon as he finished his words. Wah! Yi Mo appeared in front of Jian Wushuang swiftly with his sword light. Both the body and the sword were like flowing light. How fast! It is so fast! A large group of disciples in a marquis's mansion were astonished. This is one of the 4 ultimate sword arts of the Tianyuan sword sect, flowing light sword art. It is famous for its speed. Bai Chong was marveled in the stand. The 4 ultimate sword arts of the Tianyuan sword sect were all first-class sword arts, so once each of them was practiced to a certain degree, they would be extremely terrifying. As for the flowing light sword art, its advantage was speed. It was so fast that the sword light became many shadows and twisted in the air. It looked like it was being swept by the sword light. Jian Wushuang's expression was very serious. When Yi Mo's sword art came toward him, he used Aurora sword art first. Speed was extremely important in the Aurora sword art, and Jian Wushuang had mastered it. The sword art was extremely fast when it was used. Clang! 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 Numerous consecutive clashes could be heard, but it was obvious that Yi Mo's flowing light sword art was faster. Although Jian Wushuang tried his best, Aurora sword art was only a first-class sword art, while the flowing light sword art was a supreme sword art. It was even known as an ultimate sword art in the Tianyuan sword sect, which mainly studied sword principle. There was a big gap between the level of these two sword arts, so even though Jian Wushuang had mastered the Aurora sword art, he still could not gain an advantage. In the arena, Jian Wushuang was forced to retreat continuously. Then suddenly, a fierce chop instead of the usual sword jab came towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang immediately noticed. He raised his long sword naturally, meeting the fierce sword shadow with his body sinking slightly, and then he retreated very quickly. Jian Wushuang, your swordsmanship is not so great. Yi Mo glared at Jian Wushuang ruthlessly. If your strength is like this, then the battle is over. Just as Yi Mo finished speaking, a strong sword essence suddenly burst from him. He moved the long sword in his hands slowly. With this move, a huge dim shadow with a height of over 10 meters appeared from behind. The long sword was moving with Yi Mo. Finally, the sword art had matured. Boundless Heaven sword art, legendary maneuver. Yi Mo slashed suddenly with the long sword in his hand. The enormous sword shadow was also wavering. This sword seemed to be able to split the world in half. The strong power left the crowd breathless. The horrible sword essence could destroy nearly everything. All the people on the drill ground were amazed. Not good. Bai Chong was in the arena. His expression became serious and the spiritual power appeared in his hands. He was ready to save Jian Wushuang. However, he became hesitant as soon as he saw Jian Wushuang's expression. Jian Wushuang's expression was very subtle, with hints of seriousness and surprise, but mostly excitement. Is he going to use the 11th move? Jian Wushuang stared at the strong sword light coming toward him. At this moment, a deep awareness of crisis sprang up from the bottom of his heart. He thought about how this sword could cut him into two pieces. But this unprecedented life-or-death crisis made him feel something. In this moment of life or death, he became calmer and closed his eyes. Is this it? Is it like this? I finally understand what it was that prevented me from using this style. It is the ruthlessness for killing. If the sword is for killing, how could I lack the ruthlessness for killing? Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, an onrush of excitement flashed before his eyes, and he waved the triple-kill sword. It was the second move of the anonymous sword art, sword-killing movement. Chapter 33. Chapter 33, Confusion. Hua. A dazzling bloody sword light swept directly out. Killing intent began to emerge and rise. Sword-killing movement. Bai Chong stood up instantly, stunned by this dazzling bloody sword light, and said, the second move of the formless sword art, sword-killing movement. He managed to put it to good use. Sword-killing movement. Shui Hanshin was also surprised by this, apparently knowing the prestige of the second formless sword art, sword-killing movement. Shui Hanshin, hurry up. Help your disciple, said Bai Chong. Lowering her eyesight slightly, Shui Hanshin gazed at the two nearly colliding sword lights in the arena and sighed in frustration. She moved quickly. Clang! Having collided with each other in the arena, the two horrifying sword lights instantly witnessed victory and defeat. What? Yemo, with his eyes wide open, found it rather hard to believe that the most powerful attack, with all of his strength, had been totally defeated without any struggle. Then the dazzling bloody sword light, still concentrating all its power, hacked straight towards him. An unprecedented crisis of death immediately shrouded him. Shui Hanshin's figure suddenly flashed in front of him at the last second, and the bloody sword light dissipated with just the wave of a hand. Only complete silence remained in the arena. Yemo clenched his teeth, gazing firmly at Jian Wushuang, his heart full of unwillingness. He accepted this defeat unwillingly and helplessly. After all, he knew clearly that he would have died if his great master had not given him a hand. Such a terrifying sword stroke could easily tear his body apart. At this moment, Jian Wushuang gazed past Yemo. He was suffering great agony from using the soul-devouring secret skill. Even his face looked extremely ferocious. This skill was far more fearful than he ever imagined. It reached the extreme limit in only a short amount of time. Bzzz. The soul-devouring secret skill ceased spontaneously, and the soaring aura around Jian Wushuang faded away rapidly, even to an ignorable extent. Jian Wushuang could not be more feeble, and his entire body was trembling. On the contrary, his inner unyielding willpower was the source of standing still. When he raised his eyes, the triple-kill sword in his hand headed precisely towards Shui Hanshin. Unconvinced? Then fight. The rising sword essence suddenly erupted. It was this moment that impressed the entire audience on the drill ground. They all saw how Jian Wushuang had become so weak, yet the battle intent and sword essence around him never faded away. Shui Hanshin's complexion was pale and cold, she was already overwhelmed with helplessness. Fight back. How is this possible? Since it stemmed from the conflicts between Jian Wushuang and Jian Menger, Yemo had helped the defeated Jian Menger, which was far too excessive. A putative second fight was not only excessive but extremely shameless. As one of the elders of the Tianyuan sword sect and an expert at the peak of the Gold Core realm, Shui Hanshin had somewhat retained her gentility and self-respect. Menger. Shui Hanshin glanced at Jian Menger with a pale face and stupefied expression. She said, "You have no choice but to cultivate with me in the Tianyuan sword sect from now on, and are forbidden to step outside for 3 years, during which I will promptly teach you all my skills." Suddenly Jian Menger was astonished, showing a very complicated look. But then she let out a deferential, yes, nodding her head. Jian Wushuang. Shui Hanxin gazed coldly back at Jian Wushuang. You won today. It only shows that there are some limitations on teaching my disciple, not for a shortage of some more exceptional disciples in my Tianyuan sword sect. In 3 years we will witness another competition between you and Menger. Another competition in 3 years? A slow sly smile crept at the corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth. He looked Jian Menger up and down, then snickered silently. Jian Wushuang himself was deeply aware of it. Jian Menger had been defeated by someone not even qualified to compete. After all, the gap between them was bound to increase because what he had been cultivating was the heavenly creation skill. Silently turning as if Jian Menger had no presence, he headed downstairs slowly. Any time. An icy utterance came from Jian Wushuang, resounding throughout the drill ground. Everyone focused on the heavy footsteps below as if each individual step was terrifically tough. Everyone could feel how the existing sword essence was growing more and more powerful with each step. Nowadays, from the perspective of the audience, Jian Wushuang was spontaneously endowed with something peculiar. No one could figure out what it was exactly. As Jian Wushuang's figure gradually disappeared from their sight, they were all amazed at the strong soaring sword essence. There were no words, only silence. On one of the top floors of the arena tower, 4 figures stood still. The 4 seniors looked very ancient. The gray-haired leader wore a long robe. The 4 great elders of Sword Pavilion. The senior leader with a long robe was the impressive Elder Hong. On such a critical day, a decisive time for the Sword Pavilion, Jian Wushuang hadn't let the 4 elders down, even growing enough to create a miracle. He had defeated Jian Menger with only 2 months of cultivation. Such an unprecedented achievement was surely a great shock within the Sword Pavilion, even to these 4. However, the 4 elders stood still, more depressed than ever before. Deep misgivings, rather than any joy, emerged on their withered faces. With a low voice, one of the elders said, "Brother, I assume you see it?" Nodding, Elder Hong concentrated on Jian Wushuang's back, his eyes never leaving it. Despite being tired physically and mentally, he still stands firm and tense. Sword essence surges upwards, but never disperses. The awakening of sword soul, the same as our pavilion master. Absolutely. Once they heard the awakening of sword soul, their looks suddenly became respectful and earnest. Meanwhile, Elder Hong looked up at the immense sky and wondered how the previously sunny day somehow now showed a hint of darkness. Elder Hong lifted up his hand, covering the upward universe, and slowly uttered, "Oh. It's about to change." Chapter 34. Chapter 34, Scarlet, Kill Command. The annual Sword Marquee token battle was over. In the battle, the exceptional genius Jian Menger, who everyone had been expecting to win, had shown remarkable talent. However, to everyone's surprise, she had been completely overshadowed by someone else. 2 months prior, Jian Wushuang had been an untalented normal person. But now, only 2 months later, he had become the victor in the battle. Not only did he defeat Jian Menger, but he even defeated Jian Menger's senior brother, Yi Mo, who had achieved the exceptional spiritual sea realm. A real genius. More than a monster. The whole Sword Marquee mansion and even the whole Bahui Commandery were talking about him with great relish. In the Bahui Commandery County, an old man in a gray robe with silver-white hair walked alone through the streets. It was Elder Hong. He came to a deserted alley. In this alley, there was a shabby wine shop that had been there for years, but no one came here to buy wine. The whole wine shop had only one person, the proprietress. Elder Hong walked into the wine shop and looked at the proprietress standing behind the counter. Without saying anything, he walked directly into the inner hall to wait. After a while, the old woman, the proprietress of the wine shop, came in gracefully. "How long has it been since you've been here, blind old man?" 2 years. The middle-aged woman smiled. "I came here today for something important," Elder Hong said with dignity. Why didn't you stop by when you were free? You are a little ungrateful. The woman said this with a weak smile, and then asked, What's the matter? Elder Hong took a deep breath and said, The young master has awakened the sword soul. What? A moment ago, the woman had been very calm. Her face immediately became extremely solemn. Jian Wushuang would have been very surprised if he had heard the term that Elder Hong used. He had always been known as Young Pavilion Master, but now he'd become the Young Master. Sword Soul. The soul of the sword ancestor. The woman said solemnly, I am very surprised that after the master awakened the sword soul, the young master also awakened his own sword soul. Both father and son awakening sword soul simultaneously, that is almost inconceivable. It is incredible, but it happened, Elder Hong said. Although awakening sword soul has great benefits, it also has evil accompaniments. If I am right, now that young master's sword soul is awakened, people in that place will certainly be aware of it, and they will soon come to kill the young master. Kill the young master? Just as they dealt with the master that year? The woman had a trace of killing intent in her eyes. Yes, so we must act immediately. Elder Hong's voice was solemn, and he immediately drew a letter out from his arm. Go at once, and send this letter to the one in Golden Dragon Palace. He must be informed as quickly as possible. Yes. She nodded solemnly and took the letter. She set off without hesitation. In the meantime, in Tianyan Province Qingdong Commandery, in a slightly secret chamber. By candlelight, a man with a purple coat sat solemnly reading the sealed letter before him. Suddenly, the door of the chamber was opened, and a black-robed man ran in quickly. Hall Master, there is an urgent order. The black-robed man respectfully handed him a letter. He opened the letter. The first thing he saw was a blood-colored token. The token had a word carved in clear scarlet, kill. A scarlet kill command. The man was surprised. The organization he belonged to was extremely powerful. People were scared to hear the name of the organization everywhere in the Tianzong dynasty. There were many orders for organizing top-level people, such as the bronze, silver, and golden killing commands. But the Scarlet Kill Command was the supreme command of the organization. Only the mysterious leader of their organization could release it. A Scarlet Kill meant that it had to be done regardless of the price, as long as they could kill the enemy. Even if all the experts who were sent to assassinate the target would die. The Scarlet Kill Command had been handed down only a few times since the organization's creation. Pass down the order. Make all assassins above silver masked level come back immediately. No matter what they are doing now. Even if they've accepted a task, make them give up the task or delay it immediately. If anybody hasn't returned within 3 days of receiving this order, he will be killed. The man sneered. Yes. The black-robed man nodded respectfully. He continued to look at the letter. Bahui Commander, Sword Marquis Mansion, Jian Wushuang. From this day on, we shall keep a close watch over our target's actions. We must not let him out of our sight before we are ready to make our move. Sword Marquis Mansion. It had been 5 days since the battle ended. During the past 5 days, 2 great events had occurred in Sword Marquis Mansion. The first was that the mansion master, Jian Xinhong, had appointed Jian Wushuang as the new Sword Pavilion Master. No one was surprised. After all, 2 months ago Jian Xinhong had appointed Jian Menger as the Sword Pavilion Master. He had been preparing to hold the official ceremony after the token battle. But, during that battle, Jian Menger had been defeated by Jian Wushuang directly, in front of many people. Plus, Jian Wushuang himself belonged to Sword Pavilion. His swordsmanship was unique, and he took over as Sword Pavilion Master in a more convincing way than Jian Menger. As for the second thing, it was the great elder of Red Martial Hall. Jian Lan had resigned from his position after the battle and left Sword Marquis Mansion to travel far and wide. This caused a great stir in Sword Marquis Mansion, but it was understandable. After the battle, because of her talent, no one had said anything to Jian Menger. She had followed her great master to go to the Tianyuan sword sect and cultivate. But Jian Lan was a joke in Sword Marquis Mansion, and a lot of people were stealthily sarcastic towards him. Jian Lan had been aware, resolutely resigning his position as Great Elder, leaving Sword Marquis Mansion. It had been a good choice. In the courtyard, Jian Wushuang was practicing his swordsmanship alone. Sword light was moving, and it was confusing. For a long time, Jian Wushuang stood with his sword. It's been 5 days, but my body still hasn't really recovered. Jian Wushuang said secretly. The soul-devouring secret skill had done so much damage to his body that it had been in a state of extreme weakness since then. It had not returned to peak condition yet. Well. Jian Wushuang raised his head suddenly and looked at the yard. 4 old figures came in, the 4 great elders of Sword Pavilion, headed by Elder Hong. Elder Hong, Senior Yuan, Senior Qing, Senior Li, Jian Wushuang called out immediately. Chapter 35. Chapter 35, Follow Me. Young Pavilion Master. The 4 great elders walked before Jian Wushuang, then Elder Hong said, "We are here to thank you. Sword Pavilion would have fallen into the hands of Red Martial Hall if you hadn't defeated Jian Menger." Senior Yuan said, "Yes, you were magnificent, young Pavilion Master. It was amazing that it only took 2 months for you to surpass Jian Menger. You are definitely the son of the Pavilion Master." Senior Qing proudly said, "When I heard that you, young Pavilion Master, would have a battle with Jian Menger, I was sure that you could defeat her." Senior Li refuted him at once, "You dare to say that? You were the first to say that it was impossible." Hearing the 4 great elders' words and even seeing them play with each other, Jian Wushuang smiled. His heart was full of gratification. But at the moment, Elder Hong looked at him and said, "Young Pavilion Master, you did a good job at a tough time. You held the Sword Pavilion together for us. But now you are leaving." "Leaving? Where am I going?" Jian Wushuang was surprised. With severe countenance, Elder Hong said, "You are leaving Sword Marquis Mansion and going somewhere else." Jian Wushuang felt a little puzzled, but why? Because, Elder Hong was silent, not knowing how to answer. A cold voice suddenly rang out, "Stop your nonsense." As Jian Wushuang turned and looked around, a green-clothed woman appeared behind him. The green-clothed woman was graceful, with black hair and a veil covering her face. Although people could not see her actual appearance, one could tell that the woman was very beautiful just by looking into her eyes. The green-clothed woman seemed charming. However, there was a faint smell on her body. All the good was gone. Jian Wushuang frowned and asked, "Who are you?" He was sure that he had never seen this woman. Elder Hong noticed the green-clothed woman and didn't feel any sense of amazement. He said, "If you're here, that means that the others should be ready." "Yes," she nodded, stepping toward Jian Wushuang. "There is little time to say so much. You. Come with me at once." "Follow you?" Jian Wushuang showed alertness, and sword essence began to gather in his body. "Ridiculous." The woman laughed and moved around. Jian Wushuang did not react as the woman patted his forehead with her palm. At this moment a majestic spiritual power poured into his body. It blocked his 8 extra channels and then seized his hands. Jian Wushuang wanted to rebel, but he realized, to his horror, that he could not control his spiritual power. Jian Wushuang was frightened. Gold core. She has at least cultivated a gold core, she might even be an expert of the gold core realm. Elder Hong said loudly, "Young Pavilion Master, you can go with her. She won't hurt you." Jian Wushuang tried to say something, but all of a sudden. Boom! A terrifying roar came from close behind, immediately followed by a large amount of spiritual power. "Who are you? How dare you behave atrociously in my Sword Marquis Mansion?" A voice immediately rang through the sky. Jian Wushuang recognized that the voice, it was the Sword Marquis Mansion Master, Jian Xinhong. They're coming, said the green-clothed woman, who had already put Jian Wushuang behind her back. I'll take him and hand everything else over to you. The four of us are ready. Elder Hong and other three great elders looked at each other, and each took out a scarlet pill. They did not hesitate to swallow the scarlet pill. Blind old man. Another person came to the courtyard, a graceful middle-aged woman. She was the proprietress of the wine shop where Elder Hong had gone before. Jiao Jun, noticing that someone had come in, Elder Hong became nervous. The woman smiled, nothing else to say. Give me a scarlet pill. Elder Hong frowned. No. Are you not willing or you do not have any? The woman, Jiao Jun, smiled and then took out a scarlet pill. Fortunately, I prepared one for myself. After finishing her words, she swallowed it quickly, not noticing Elder Hong's expression. Elder Hong sighed, Jiao Jun, why would you do this? Blind old man, do you know why I always call you a blind old man? Because you can't see how I've felt about you for so many years, Jiao Jun smiled, but it does not matter anymore. Although we have not really been together, at least we can die together. Elder Hong took a deep look at Jiao Jun and nodded heavily. The four great elders of the Sword Pavilion and Jiao Jun had swallowed a scarlet pill. The aura surrounding the five people instantly soared up, directly reaching an unprecedented level. Gold Core. 5 people had all reached the primordial Gold Core realm. Elder Hong's aura was the strongest, reaching the point of the profound Gold Core realm. This, Jian Wushuang was completely confused. What's happening? What's the matter? Who broke into the Sword Marquis mansion? Who is the green-clothed woman with a veil? What kind of pill did the 4 elders swallow? Why did their strength suddenly improve so much? And most importantly, why did they swallow this pill? Why do they look like they are going to die? Jian Wushuang had so many doubts. He did not understand what had happened. All of this was too sudden, there had been no signs at all. Ji Wuyue, I will leave the young master to you. Elder Hong turned red and growled with a trace of madness in his eyes. Ji Wuyue looked at the 5 people. 2 words that were so heavy came out of the mouth of the green-clothed woman slowly. Take care. After finishing her words, Ji Wuyue did not hesitate to turn around, taking Jian Wushuang away at full speed and sweeping out of Sword Marquis Mansion. Just as Ji Wuyue turned and left, a wide roar of rage rang through Sword Marquis Mansion. Ha, you Blood Feather Tower bastards, prepare to go to hell. Well, you 5 old people. How dare you block us? Kill them. Kill them. As the roar of rage echoed, the whole Sword Marquis Mansion was caught in a terrible war. Deadly amounts of spiritual power soared through the area. While all this was happening, Jian Wushuang was totally at a loss. What on earth is happening? Chapter 36. Chapter 36, Blood Feather Tower. While Sword Marquis Mansion was in upheaval, something happened in the gladiator arena. Sir. A black-robed servant came anxiously to Bai Chong and passed him a note. After taking a glance at the note, Bai Chong's face turned grim. Some impressive words were written on the note. Jian Wushuang is in danger. Please quickly come to Tranquility Forest, 10 miles from the border, to save him. Bai Chong then looked at the signature. Smile allure, Ji Wumeng. Ji Wumeng. A look of fear showed in Bai Chong's eyes and then he immediately ordered, all golden-robed servants follow me, right now. A moment later, 7 figures full of energy rushed out from the gladiator arena. Each of these 7 figures had reached the Gold Core realm. Among which leader Bai Chong ranked at the peak of the Gold Core realm. Tranquility Forest, 10 miles from the border. Several figures stood in the treetops, waiting quietly. Here they come, said a burly man with a head of disorganized hair. He followed them with his eyes. Whoosh! Ji Wuyue appeared at the top of one of the big trees, with Jian Wushuang right behind her. Ji Wuyue said indifferently, then I'll leave it to you. Ji Wuyue, you didn't tell us before that our task was to fight against Blood Feather Tower, said an aloof and thin young man. How about double rewards after you finish the task? Ji Wuyue looked around with her cold and gloomy eyes. Okay. Suddenly the experts who had felt dissatisfied before were nodding their heads with desire in their eyes. I need you guys to obstruct the experts from Blood Feather Tower for as long as you can. I also found some extra helpers for you. After saying that, Ji Wuyue looked up to the sky where 7 figures rapidly skimmed over towards them. Golden Dragon guards from the Golden Dragon Palace? When Bai Chong came to Tranquility Forest, he not only saw those extraordinary figures on the treetops but also noticed gold rings on their index fingers. Each of them wore a gold ring, the symbol of the Golden Dragon Guard. Sir Bai Chong. Upon seeing their arrival, Jian Wushuang felt pleasantly surprised, even though he was under the complete control of Ji Wuyue. Jian Wushuang. Bai Chong glanced at him and then looked at Ji Wuyue with eyes suddenly becoming strange. Are you Ji Wumeng? No, you are not her. You are Ji Wuyue. Yes, it's me. Ji Wuyue nodded and said sternly, Bai Chong, when my elder sister was alive, she was very kind to you and my brother-in-law also took you as his confidant. Now their son is in danger, won't you help him? Bai Chong's face darkened and he looked at Jian Wushuang with a serious expression. Take him away right now. As for the people from Blood Feather Tower, I will try to obstruct them for a while, Bai Chong said in a low voice. Thank you so much. After thanking him, Ji Wuyue looked at the burly man beside her and said, Boo, let's go. Yes. The burly man nodded and immediately took Jian Wushuang, jumping into the forest with Ji Wuyue. But just as they jumped into the forest, a chipper laugh burst between the sky and the earth. Haha, Ji Wumeng, where are you taking that little guy? Don't you want to take the antidote? Only I have the antidote, so you'd better stay. The voice was full of evil. After hearing the words, Ji Wuyue felt a slight chill but didn't intend to stop. After the laughter, a loud roar burst out. It was obvious that the two sides had collided. Golden Dragon Guard. Men from the Gladiator Arena. How dare you intercept our Blood Feather Tower? Humph, bastards of Blood Feather Tower. Do you think that our Gladiator Arena fears you? Kill. The war broke out instantly with roaring and shouting. In the forest. Are those people who want to kill me? Jian Wushuang could see several black-robed men behind them when he turned his head. Most of them wore silver masks and just a few wore golden masks. What the hell is going on? Those people are all here. What about Sword Marquis Mansion and Elder Hong? Jian Wushuang shouted anxiously. Shut up, Ji Wuyue shouted loudly. She continued, unsympathetically, these people are coming for you. Their arrival here means the battle in Sword Marquis Mansion has already finished. As for Elder Hong and the others, they are dead. Dead? Jian Wushuang was stunned. All 5 of them swallowed scarlet pills. It enhances their strength quickly by consuming the person's life. A warrior can only swallow 1 scarlet pill in their lifetime because they are doomed to die after taking it. What? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Finally, he understood why their strength had enhanced so much before. They had swallowed a scarlet pill and paid for it with their lives. Why? Why? Jian Wushuang could not help roaring. Why? Because you awoke the sword soul, and that's how things are now, said Ji Wuyue. Sword soul. What is sword soul? Jian Wushuang still felt baffled. He had no idea what she was talking about. It seems that you haven't noticed. Right, you have just awoken it, it's normal that you don't know. But once your strength increases in the future you will notice the existence of Sword Soul, said Ji Wuyue. Do those people want to kill me just because I have awoken Sword Soul? What the hell is Sword Soul? Jian Wushuang roared. I don't know what Sword Soul is because neither I nor the others have awoken it. The only one who has awoken it is your father, Jian Nantian, Ji Wuyue said in an uncaring voice. Haven't you always wanted to know why your father left 4 years ago and disappeared without any news? What? Jian Wushuang glared and said, was it because he also awoke Sword Soul? Yes, Ji Wuyue nodded, but you are different. Your father awoke Sword Soul during the Gold Core period. It didn't take long before Blood Feather Tower came to kill your father after they heard that your father had awoken his Sword Soul. But they underestimated your father, which allowed him to escape by a fluke. And then your father was afraid of incriminating you in Sword Marquis Mansion, so he left and started living like a fugitive. And now? Jian Wushuang hurriedly asked. Now? Your father has been caught by Blood Feather Tower. I don't know whether he is alive or not. Ji Wuyue shook her head with a wry smile, you only care about your father. Don't you want to ask about your mother? Your mother. While speaking, Ji Wuyue abruptly had a quiver and her extremely beautiful eyes soon became scarlet with violence. Chapter 37. Chapter 37, Tragic. My mother? Jian Wushuang asked enthusiastically. He had grown up with his father, Jian Nantian, until he was 12, when his father suddenly left and was nowhere to be found. As for his mother, he had never seen her, and his father had never even mentioned her. So until now, he did not even know what his mother's name was. You know my mother? Jian Wushuang was just about to ask. But all of a sudden, Ji Wuyue threw him directly to the burly man that was skittering beside her. Wuyue, you, the burly man took Jian Wushuang very quickly and looked at Ji Wuyue at the same time. However, what he saw greatly shocked him. Ji Wuyue's veil had dropped, exposing a horrible face that was completely purulent, with blue veins surging upon its surface as if millions of insects had bitten her. Ji Wuyue roared out crazily and miserably, looking to be in extreme pain. Damn! Poisoning! The burly man, Bu's face became gloomy. This didn't happen earlier, nor later, but now suddenly. Poisoning! Jian Wushuang looked at Ji Wuyue in shock. Jian Wushuang! A slightly crazy voice suddenly rushed out from Ji Wuyue's mouth. Listen! Your mother, Ji Wumeng, was the eldest daughter of the Ji clan. 3 years ago, your father was hunted by Blood Feather Tower, and having no other choice, he fled to the Ji clan. In order to protect your father, the Ji clan went against Blood Feather Tower and resisted all the experts that they sent. In the end, your mother was killed, your father was taken away by Blood Feather Tower, and our Ji clan was extinguished. All of the families were slaughtered. I was the only one lucky enough to escape. So you have to remember, you are not only the son of Jian Nantian, but also the last in the bloodline of the Ji clan, except for me. You have to live well and grow up, improving your strength and ability so that you can destroy Blood Feather Tower and avenge my entire Ji clan. And Ji Wuyue had an expression of madness as the extreme pain of the poisoning made her words continuously stutter. You have to keep. Triple kill. Sword. Well, your father, said that is, the token, enter into the ancestors' land. By the end, Ji Wuyue's voice had already turned hysterical. Go. Bu, take him and go at once. Ji Wuyue suddenly roared and shouted again. Bu looked into Ji Wuyue's eyes deeply, then carried Jian Wushuang on his back. Go. Aunt. She is my aunt. Jian Wushuang finally understood who Ji Wuyue was. No, take my aunt, we'll go together. Once poisoned, Wuyue will instantly turn to unconscious madness and she will attack everyone. If we take her with us, none of us would be able to escape, Bu said in a low voice. Even so, we cannot leave her behind, Jian Wushuang shouted. Bu turned a dark expression and slapped Jian Wushuang on the back of the neck, immediately knocking him unconscious. Taking the unconscious Jian Wushuang, Bu quickly fled from the area. Soon, a man in a purple coat from Blood Feather Tower found Ji Wuyue, who had gone crazy. Ha, Ji Wuyue, come and follow me obediently. Old bastard Aning, you will meet a horrible end. Half a day later, the slaughter in Tranquility Forest had finally calmed down. Bones and corpses were all over the battlefield, and more than a dozen black-robed men and masks were standing there, led by the man in a purple coat. Even sending out more than 30 silver-masked assassins and 3 gold-masked assassins was not enough to kill the target. More than half of the silver-masked assassins were killed or injured, and even one of the gold-masked assassins died. So many losses, what do you have to show for it? The man in purple's expression became heavy. Clatter, clatter. The black-robed man immediately knelt down behind him. Send the order. Release the Scarlet Arrest warrant all over Tianyan province. You must find him, even if you must completely turn Tianyan province upside down, the man in purple said in a chilling tone. Yes, answered those black-robed men immediately. Although we did not kill the target this time, catching Ji Wuyue counts for a little bit. The man in purple muttered, with Ji Wuyue, I am not afraid that Jian Nantian will not speak. After the tragic battle, the entire Sword Marquis mansion was in ruins, and the atmosphere was extremely depressing. Every corpse was moved to the back of the central drill ground, up to 100 corpses at a glance. A large number of the disciples in Sword Marquis mansion stood on the edge of the drill ground, looking at the 100 corpses, each one of them with an ugly face. Mansion Master, the casualties have been counted, said an elder of Red Martial Hall, coming over to Jian Xinhong. Fine, go on then. Jian Xinhong's pale face, and the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, showed that he had obviously been through a great battle and was seriously injured. 8 experts above the spiritual sea realm died. 4 of them are the 4 great elders of Sword Pavilion, the rest are the servants of Sword Pavilion, that elder said. All of them are from Sword Pavilion. Jian Xinhong's eyes stared and he asked again, what about the dead disciples? There were 94 disciples of the spirit path that died. Most of those disciples did not take the initiative to join the war. Instead, they were helplessly dragged into it. The youngest of them was only 12, and had just gathered spiritual power, the elder replied, with a trace of grief. Hearing the number of casualties, Jian Xinhong was shocked from head to toe. His face became green and then turned pale. After a long time, he sighed deeply and said, bury them well. In the drill ground, there were several other people standing there who looked very dismal as well. They were Bai Chong and others from the gladiator arena. But the gold-robed servants that followed Bai Chong had decreased from 6 to 3. Bai Chong was looking at the corpses spread all over the ground, and his right hand could not help touching his left sleeve, which was empty and covered in blood, impressively lacking an arm. Jian Nantian and Ji Wumeng, I no longer owe you a debt of gratitude. On this day, with the sudden outbreak of war, even the forces of all the parties involved were not clear about it. The result was. In the Sword Marquis mansion, the 4 great elders of the Sword Pavilion had all died. Jiu Jun had died. The 4 servants of the Sword Pavilion and nearly 100 ordinary disciples of the Spirit Path were implicated and killed as well, the youngest of whom was only 12 years old. Sword Marquis mansion was full of countless wounded. Of the 6 gold-robed servants from the gladiator arena, 3 died and the other 3 were all seriously injured. Bai Chong had lost an arm. Ji Wuyue was captured alive. What a tragedy! How tragic the war was. The source of this war was the awakening of Jian Wushuang's sword soul. Chapter 38. Chapter 38, A Blood Feud. In a cave on an unknown hill, a few hundred miles inside Tranquility Forest, Jian Wushuang slowly woke up after being unconscious for most of the day. Boy, are you awake? The shaggy-haired, burly Bu was sitting beside him, burning coals for barbecuing. He threw a piece of meat to Jian Wushuang and said, you must be hungry after being unconscious for so long. Come on. My name is Sima Bu, but people call me Bu. You can call me Elder Brother Bu, he said. Brother Bu, Jian Wushuang called out and immediately asked him, where is my aunt? Ji Wuyue. Sima Bu shook his head and heaved a deep sigh. She should have been caught by Blood Feather Tower. They are heartless and cruel. She would come to a sticky end. Asshole, cursed Jian Wushuang. Boy, your name is Jian Wushuang, right? Although you are young, you have caused Blood Feather Tower to appoint so many people to kill you. Sima Bu sighed and said, but you seem to be at a loss. Yes, I'm puzzled. Up to this point, all I know is that I have awakened my sword soul. So they want to chase me down, just as they chased my father years ago. That's why he left Sword Marquee Mansion. But what is a sword soul? Jian Wushuang frowned. Sword soul? I haven't heard of it. But if Blood Feather Tower wants to kill you and your father so recklessly because of this sword soul, and they even slaughtered the Ji clan without hesitation, then it must be important, Sima Bu said. Eldest brother Bu, since you have a deep relationship with my aunt, you must know something about her, the Ji clan, and Blood Feather Tower. Please tell me something, Jian Wushuang pleaded seriously. We have been on many adventures together, and we were like Damon and Pythias, but I don't know much about her. However, I do know something about the Ji clan and Blood Feather Tower, Sima Bu answered at once. When it comes to Blood Feather Tower and the Ji clan, we have to start with the general pattern of the Tianzong dynasty. The Tianzong dynasty has a vast territory with 16 provinces, and each province has many commanderies. For example, Tianyan province has 108 commanderies, and Bahui commandery is only one of them. So you can imagine how wide the Tianzong dynasty is. Although the Sword Marquee Mansion that you belong to is the most powerful, compared to the whole Tianzong dynasty, it is so weak that it can't even be regarded as a third-rate power. An amazing gleam appeared into Jian Wushuang's eye, but it soon disappeared. Indeed, it was only in Bahui Commandery that Sword Marquee Mansion was a top power. In the entire Tianzong dynasty, it was not. Even in Tianyan province, there were countless powers stronger than Mansion of Sword Marquee. For example, the Tianyuan Sword Sect, one of the 5 sects in Tianyan province, was not something that the Sword Marquee Mansion could compare to. The 3 hegemons in the Tianzong dynasty are Golden Dragon Palace, the Gladiator Arena, and Blood Feather Tower. Sima Bu continued. The ruler of Golden Dragon Palace is the monarch of the Tianzong dynasty. Branches of Golden Dragon Palace can be found all over the Tianzong dynasty. Although its power is overwhelming, it isn't restrained by the Golden Dragon Guard like me and your aunt, Ji Wuyue. The power of the Gladiator Arena, the biggest chamber of commerce, is everywhere in the Tianzong dynasty. It is said that the Gladiator Arena has the support of the imperial household, which must be the prince. The last one is Blood Feather Tower. Everyone that wanders around the Tianzong dynasty knows about and fears Blood Feather Tower. It is the #1 assassin organization recognized by the public. There are a large number of invisible assassins. These assassins are divided into 4 levels: copper, silver, gold, and purple. Silver masks generally have cultivation in the gold core realm. Gold masks are at the peak of the gold core realm. And purple masks are supreme experts in the legendary Yin-Yang Void realm. This time, dozens of silver-masked assassins and 3 gold-masked assassins chased us down. What I talked about was the 3 hegemons with terrible strength who stood in the first echelons of the Tianzong dynasty. The ancient 8 clans were second to them. It is said that the 8 clans were passed down since the establishment of the Tianzong dynasty, ancient and culturally rich. One of them, the Ji clan, was wiped out 3 years ago, which shook the whole Tianzong dynasty. All the powers were curious about the reason. However, they were killed because of granting asylum to your father, Sima Bu said inside. What about my aunt? What about the poison in her body? Jian Wushuang looked sullen. It is called heart-biting poison and it's very poisonous, enough to completely destroy a person gradually. When I saw her 3 years ago, she was poisoned and it would occasionally attack her. When it does, she suffers unprecedented pain that directly destroys her mind. She will refuse to have anything to do with her kin or friends, only understanding to crazily kill. I have seen it several times, it's so miserable. The attack of the poison manifests suddenly, without any regularity. She was trying to save you this time, but it so happened that the poison attacked, alas. Sima Bu sighed gently, and said slowly, the poison quickly makes her fall into madness. If we took her, we could not have escaped, so. Saying this, Sima Bu looked pale. He and Ji Wuyue had gone through many things together, and they had a deep relationship. He would have never left without her unless there was no choice. Who poisoned my aunt? Asked Jian Wushuang. I know. It was an Ing, the hall master of Blood Feather Tower in Tianyan province. He was among the assassins this time, said Sima Bu. An Ing? Good, I will remember him. Not only him, but also Blood Feather Tower. Jian Wushuang raised his head and his eyes were filled with unprecedented killing intent. He did not know his lot before, but now, he knew everything. His mother was the firstborn daughter of the Ji clan. He had the blood of the Ji clan. That is to say, he bore the blood feud of the Ji clan. In order to protect his father, the entire Ji clan was killed. His father, who had been caught by Blood Feather Tower, could be dead or alive. His aunt, persecuted by Blood Feather Tower, was suffering from severe pain. Now, in order to save him, she had been caught by them. With the awakening of his sword soul, the experts of Blood Feather Tower had come to kill him for the first time. All of the culprits were from Blood Feather Tower. Chapter 39. Chapter 39, Inescapable Net. Feeling the killing intention from Jian Wushuang, Sima Bu could not help but secretly shake his head. He could understand Jian Wushuang's killing intent toward Blood Feather Tower, but Blood Feather Tower was so powerful that not everyone could provoke it. Sitting in the cave, Jian Wushuang held his hands tightly with his eyes closed, slowly restraining his tremendous killing intent from the extreme anger that he originally felt. It was apparent that he had already calmed himself down. For me, Blood Feather Tower is a genuine colossus and I can't compete with them at my present strength. So I must endure for now. Endure, hide and wait. Jian Wushuang held his hands so tightly that his nails dug into his palm until he was bleeding. Although his heart was full of killing intent, he needed to restrain his sharp edge. In addition to revenge, I also have to find a solution to make all these things clear, Jian Wushuang growled. Although he now knew his own lot and the huge blood debt that was on his shoulders, he still had many doubts in his heart. For example, what on earth was Sword Soul? Why had Blood Feather Tower tried to kill him and his father, who had awakened their sword souls, regardless of everything? In addition, what was the ancestors' land that his aunt, Ji Wuyue, told him about with her last words? There were many, many doubts that he slowly needed to explore. Strength. In the final analysis, my strength was so weak that I had no ability to stand against Blood Feather Tower when it chased after me to kill me. I only survived by good luck with the help of my aunt and Elder Hong, who sacrificed themselves for me. If my strength had been great enough that Blood Feather Tower feared me and did not even dare to offend me, then none of this would have happened. Strength. Strength. Jian Wushuang growled crazily in his heart. He had never had a thirst for strength as great as he did now. Even before, when he was betrayed by Jian Menger, he had not come to this point. After all, he fought with Jian Menger for his own dignity, for his father's dignity, and for the dignity of the Sword Pavilion. But with Blood Feather Tower, it was a blood feud that would never stop until death. In such an unprecedented desire for strength, even Jian Wushuang himself did not realize that the spiritual power in his body had sprung up at that moment, and the heavenly creation skill had operated naturally. Heavenly creation skill, the technique of claiming. Suddenly. Jian Wushuang's body suddenly shuddered, with a sense of amazement in his eyes, followed by surprise. Has the ninth heaven of the divine path been broken through? So unbelievable. Even Jian Wushuang did not think that his cultivation would naturally make a breakthrough while he was full of an unprecedented desire for strength. It must be known that, just a few days ago, he relied on absorbing a large amount of primordial spiritual liquid to promote himself to the eighth heaven of the divine path. And now, just a few days later, a huge breakthrough had directly been made. The ninth heaven of the divine path was equivalent to the profound spiritual sea realm of common warriors. So that, along with the advantage of the heavenly creation skill on strength, even if he did not use the soul-devouring secret skill, his spiritual power would not be weaker than Jian Menger, who had achieved the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. His strength had risen again. The heavenly creation skill is so amazing. Jian Wushuang could not help thinking that, and was more confident with his future growth. The Blood Feather Tower was indeed a colossus for him now, but in the future, it might not be. My father, my mother, my aunt, the four elders, the Ji clan, and all the innocent people who have been implicated in this fight for me, Jian Wushuang, will bet all of myself to assure you that, in my lifetime, I will certainly slaughter Blood Feather Tower and uproot it. I will avenge you. Jian Wushuang, with cold eyes, had a determination that ran deep in his blood. The next morning. Boy, you stay here and wait for me while I go to the nearby cities to fish for information, Sima Bu said. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded. He also knew that Blood Feather Tower would not take things lying down. Jian Wushuang stayed in the cave alone and cultivated quietly. After about an hour, Sima Bu came back. Brother Bu, how is it going? Jian Wushuang asked immediately. The situation is a lot worse than I thought. I walked around in a nearby city and there were no less than 10 assassins from Blood Feather Tower that I was aware of, as well as those who were hidden deep inside, so there must have been more that I couldn't find. What's more, I went to a secret intelligence station of the Golden Dragon Palace and learned that Blood Feather Tower has issued a scarlet arrest warrant for you. Now there are many scouts from Blood Feather Tower lurking around all the big cities, only waiting for you to appear, Sima Bu said solemnly. It can be said that Blood Feather Tower has formed a tight dragnet in Bahui Commandery, even in the entire Tianyan province. So if you did appear, you would be killed by the experts of Blood Feather Tower without any ability to struggle. And with the intelligence capabilities of Blood Feather Tower, even if you bring a mask or camouflage your appearance, you will be noticed immediately by them as long as there is the slightest trace or flaw. I was going to bring you back to Golden Dragon Palace in Bahui Commandery to accomplish this task, but now it seems impossible, said Sima Bu. I can't stay in Bahui Commandery for now. Jian Wushuang said with a low tone, not even Tianyan province is safe. I must leave quickly. You are right. Sima Bu nodded. I realized it out on my way back. Right now, Blood Feather Tower is mainly focused on killing you inside of Tianyan province, where it is difficult for you to survive. But in other provinces, you still have space to live, and the most suitable for you is Tiannan province, located in the surrounding area of Tianyan province. Tiannan province is one of the main provinces where the gladiator arena operates, so the forces of Blood Feather Tower are not very strong there. It's the most suitable place for you to go. But the road from Bahui Commandery to Tiannan province is relatively long and it requires passing through the dark forest. The dark forest? Jian Wushuang gazed slightly. He had also heard of the dark forest, which is a vast forest between Tianyan province and Tiannan province. It was famous as a dangerous place full of spirit beasts and crisis. Then, I will go to Tiannan province. Jian Wushuang said seriously. As for the dark forest, I'll just have passed through it. Ha, you are young, but you have great courage. Don't worry, I will go to Tiannan province with you and escort you through the dark forest safely. Sima Bu laughed. Even without you, I still have to go through the dark forest. Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled with energy. Tiannan province was his only chance to live and no one could stand in the way of his survival. Chapter 40. Chapter 40, The Dark Forest. In the dark forest, spirit beasts were everywhere. It was a time of crisis. If Jian Wushuang wanted to go to Tiannan province, he had to go through the dark forest. The first day after setting foot in the dark forest. Deep in the thick jungle. Howl. After roaring, a blue shadow jumped out as if it was a ghost, rushing at Jian Wushuang and Sima Bu directly. Both of them responded quickly, and they easily moved away from the beast. "It's a scarlet leopard, no wonder it moved so fast," said Sima Bu with a low voice, looking at the spirit beast which suddenly attacked them. "Leave it to me," Jian Wushuang said with piercing eyesight. He pulled his triple kill sword from behind, and the sword light moved straight toward the scarlet leopard. "Be careful, this scarlet leopard has reached the profound spiritual sea realm," Sima Bu had only just reminded him, then Jian Wushuang showed off his unparalleled sword light the next moment. The sword light was like snow, and on such a boundless ground, broke out its spiritual power all of a sudden. Clang! 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 After a series of 3 swords split out, each sword light looked so beautiful. At that time, the scarlet leopard also charged forward, its 4 hooves, trampling heavily on the ground, then turned into lightning, rushing toward Jian Wushuang fiercely. Chi! At that moment, the brilliant sword light easily ripped a huge hole in the scarlet leopard's body, and the scarlet leopard's belly began to bleed as all its internal organs began falling out everywhere, which led to its immediate death. Too weak. Jian Wushuang glanced at the body of the scarlet leopard, and sympathetically shook his head. Compared with humans, spirit beasts at the same level were indeed more powerful. However, when it was under the condition of slaughtering, it entirely depended on the instinct of the spirit beast, which was far less than a cultivating human warrior with martial arts techniques. "I have broken through the 9th heaven of the divine path. My spiritual power could be compared to the highest level of profound spiritual sea realm, but by virtue of my swordsmanship, spirit beasts in the profound spiritual sea realm are not a threat to me at all. If it was a spirit beast in the exceptional spiritual sea realm, there may have been some pressure on me," Jian Wushuang said, with a glimmer of anticipation in his eyes. There were not many things in the dark forest, but there were many spirit beasts. Here, there were countless spirit beasts in the spiritual sea realm, and there were even quite a few spirit beasts in the gold core realm. With so many strong spirit beasts, it could serve as an excellent cultivating place as well as a dangerous spot at the same time. "Ah! Excellent swordsmanship, boy." Sima Bu came over, glancing at Jian Wushuang with astonishment. "In addition, your cultivation is not bad as well. How did you kill that scarlet leopard, in the profound spiritual sea realm, in an instant? Also, how old are you this year?" 16. Jian Wushuang told him his true age. Sima Bu stared at him. "Brother Bu, from now on, if it's not necessary, you do not have to fight. I can take charge of killing the spirit beasts on the way through the dark forest," Jian Wushuang solemnly said. "No problem. Sounds good to me." Sima Bu nodded with a smile, with no need to explain more since he knew Jian Wushuang's purpose. Half a day later. "Boy, be cautious. What you are facing now is a spurting mouse in the exceptional spiritual sea realm. It is not only fast but also has a body that's extremely hard, except for its eyes. But its means of attack are very simple. And that is its teeth, which are very sharp and can easily crunch rigid bluestones. Therefore, you'd better protect yourself from being bitten." Sima Bu reminded him off to the side. Jian Wushuang stared at the spurting mouse in front of him, a small but oppressive figure that had eyes blazing with ferocity. Frizzle. The spurting mouse made a whinny sound, then its body immediately burst out in the form of a flowing light. Purple fire sword art. Jian Wushuang, who became hot-tempered, used the triple-kill sword with a baking-hot sword edge, and instantaneously slaughtered the spurting mouse. Such a fierce fight. Because the body of the spurting mouse was so stiff, it was not hurt too much by Jian Wushuang, either by his long sword or the straight stab. The only vulnerability of the spurting mouse was its eyes. However, the target was too small and moved so fast. It was actually quite difficult to attack it. At last, Jian Wushuang was forced to use the first move of anonymous sword art, Blood Shadow. He swept his sword toward the spurting mouse with an astonishing speed. With this move, he successfully killed it. Unfortunately, the spurting mouse had also bitten off a large piece of flesh from his shoulder. It was such a painful wound. Carry on. Simply bandaging the wound on his shoulder, Jian Wushuang recovered his spiritual power and he continued on his way. That night, the moonlight was so bright but it did not reach into the forest. The complete darkness in the dark forest was horrible. Later, in the treetops of a large tree lay Sima Bu, dangling a weed and laying on his hands while his eyes looked at Jian Wushuang, who was cultivating under the tree from time to time. How hard-working this little guy is. He is so strict with himself. Sima Bu laughed secretly. Although he had entered the dark forest only one day ago, Sima Bu felt the instinctive madness in Jian Wushuang. In just one day's time, Jian Wushuang had gone through a full 8 battles, of which 6 opponents were spirit beasts in the profound transforming sea realm, while the other 2 were in the exceptional spiritual sea realm. With Jian Wushuang's present strength, it would be extremely fierce to fight with spirit beasts in the exceptional spiritual sea realm without using the soul-devouring secret skill. Like today, when fighting with a spirit beast in the exceptional spiritual sea realm, although Jian Wushuang had successfully killed one of them, he himself did not escape unharmed. A large chunk of flesh was bitten off his shoulder, and another spirit beast in the exceptional spiritual sea realm scratched him above his chest with its sharp claws, leaving a very clear bloody paw print. In fact, as extremely numerous as spirit beasts were in the dark forest, it was impossible to encounter so many spirit beasts in the profound spiritual sea realm and exceptional spiritual sea realm on the first day. This occurred because Jian Wushuang deliberately searched for those spirit beasts. As for other warriors, they tended to avoid meeting spirit beasts that had mighty strength. However, Jian Wushuang was deliberately looking for these powerful spirit beasts to battle with them. Although it's a bit crazy, he has improved through these experiences. What's more, his swordsmanship is really good, Sima Bu said to himself. Swordsmanship? Sima Bu was suddenly a little touched, but he became absorbed in thought the next moment. Early the next morning, Jian Wushuang gradually opened his eyes with a trace of joy. After one night, his spiritual power was refined a bit, and although his overall strength had not improved, at least he was making progress every day. The life-or-death fights in the dark forest with spirit beasts had also greatly promoted his swordsmanship. Carry on today, Jian Wushuang gripped his hands tightly. A madness shined deep in his eyes that had not even slightly weakened. Instead, it had become a little more powerful. Chapter 41. Chapter 41, The Sword Essence. Ping. A cold sword shadow, at a very tricky angle, stabbed directly toward the golden gibbon, which was more than 2 meters tall. Covered in greenish-black scales, it dashed toward the shadow, using its giant arms that were notorious for their outrageous strength. The moment that the sword shadow was smashed and scattered, another 3 sword lights flashed almost simultaneously. It had already been 6 days since Jian Wushuang entered the dark forest. During his search in the dark forest over the past 5 days, he had undergone dozens of battles. Some of which were fiercely dangerous, especially when battling against spirit beasts in the profound transforming sea realm and the exceptional transforming sea realm. Compared to 5 days ago, his swordsmanship appeared much sharper and he had gained much more fighting experience. Except for the one battle in the gladiator arena, Jian Wushuang had grown up training in Sword Marquee Mansion. He had no previous fighting experience with anyone before that. But now, his previous disadvantage in experience was being made up for. Clang! The fleeting and flickering shiny sword edge eluded the golden gibbon's eyes, directly puncturing its throat with an amazing piercing force. Rumbling. Its blood continued to spew out as its huge body instantly fell down. Great, that is the seventh spirit beast in the profound transforming sea realm that you have killed these last few days, said Sima Bu, walking up with a smile. Your spiritual power still needs to improve some more before it can reach the exceptional transforming sea realm, but your swordsmanship has become more refined after several days of fighting. I still have a long way to go, said Jian Wushuang, shaking his head without any sense of pride. I'm still far from having enough fighting experience. By virtue of my mastery in swordsmanship, I can now get rid of some inexperienced spirit beasts in the profound transforming sea realm. However, I have to flee instantly once I encounter stronger spirit beasts because I'm still unable to use my strength to the fullest. If only I were more experienced in battle and more adept at swordsmanship, said Jian Wushuang, holding his hands tightly. Don't aim too high. After all, you are not even in the exceptional transforming sea realm, yet you already have such awesome battle strength, said Sima Bu. Then he suddenly added, these days, I've noticed that you're highly gifted in swordsmanship, and I have something that might be useful to you. I am giving it to you for Ji Wuyue's sake. Sima Bu immediately turned his right hand upward, unfolding a yellow wire-bound book. What? Said Jian Wushuang with a little surprise, then he stared at the gold ring that was always on the ring finger of Sima Bu's right hand. Is that an interspatial ring? He asked suspiciously. Just as its name suggested, an interspatial ring contained a separate space for holding things. There was nothing else in his hand, but how did the book appear as he flipped his hand over? It went without saying that it must have been an interspatial ring. You're right, it's an interspatial ring, said Sima Bu with a smile. Presented by Gold Dragon Palace, called the Gold Dragon Ring, and symbolizing the Gold Dragon Guard. If you're interested in this and go there by any chance, you'll be given a Gold Dragon Ring by Gold Dragon Palace only after you complete the task to become a Gold Dragon Guard. Really? Jian Wushuang became excited. Anyway, I obtained this book by chance. First, you should read it carefully, as you can benefit from what this expert in sword principles had learned. By the way, he is a supreme expert in the Yin-Yang Void Realm, said Sima Bu. Insight into sword principles from an expert. And left by a supreme expert? Asked Jian Wushuang with a serious look. The 7 ranks of the spirit path, the transcending sea realm, the primordial gold core realm, and the Yin-Yang Void Realm. Among these, the primordial gold core realm already linked to the strongest, the Yin-Yang Void Realm, and a supreme expert, who was also rare in the whole Tianzong dynasty. Was it sword principle insights left by such a supreme expert? Jian Wushuang immediately took the book and began to read it carefully. It did not mention the name of the supreme expert, but it spoke of his insights in sword principle, as well as his views related to swordsmanship. Sword principle can be broken into 2 parts. Sword arts, which are merely the form of swordsmanship, and sword essence, which is required for real swordsmanship. Combining both will give you insight into sword principle. In fact, that book respectively introduced sword principle, starting with the sword arts chapter, then progressing to the second chapter, sword essence. Jian Wushuang first absorbed the sword arts chapter. If a swordsman depends on sophisticated, but formal and stiff, sword arts, there is no difference for him between normal and average sword arts. While an expert can easily surpass his rivals. Even if they are thousands of times stronger than him, as long as he is more adept at using his sword arts, and even if his sword arts are of a lower class. The pages of the sword arts chapter could be counted on one's fingers. And all they spoke of was the common sense of sword principle. But what made the book different, lay in the fact that its creator seemed to despise all sword arts in the universe. He even held the belief that sword arts were insignificant to sword principle. This senior seems biased against sword arts. Admittedly, I do agree with his view on various sword arts, but not on his thoughts that sword arts mean nothing to a warrior and can be ignored, Jian Wushuang thought. His training began with sword arts at an early age, and he believed that it very helpful to a warrior. After all, it was sword arts that had defeated Jian Menger and Yi Mo in the Sword Marquis token battle. And it was also sword arts that helped him battle spirit beasts of the exceptional transforming sea realm in the dark forest, even making it possible to kill those beasts in the end. Without sword arts, he would, at most, have only been a match for spirit beasts at the peak of the profound transforming sea realm by virtue of his unique heavenly creation skill. Even then, it is uncertain who would have won. Shaking his head secretly, Jian Wushuang turned his eyes to the Sword Essence chapter instead of the Sword Arts chapter. Sword Essence was divided into 2 sections as well. In one, Sword Principle was used to accompany and enhance one's swordsmanship. Stronger swordsmanship means stronger Sword Essence. In the second section, Sword Essence was used to shape the essences of heaven and earth through comprehension. There are many essences in the universe, including the immense earth, raging flames, and the wind, everywhere in our lives. They are all part of the strength of the universe and nature. These essences can be shaped by using one's sword essence and greatly sharpening one's swordsmanship through comprehension. Upon reaching a high enough level, any move with his sword can surpass both first-class sword arts and even legendary sword arts. There are many different kinds of sword essence, such as the sword essence of gale, the sword essence of raging fire, the sword essence of earth, and sword essence of the water drop. The contents of the Sword Essence chapter were more sophisticated and detailed than the plain introduction in the Sword Arts chapter. And, Jian Wushuang was totally immersed in its contents. Chapter 42. Chapter 42, Sword Essence of Gale. After obsessively reading the contents of the Sword Essence chapter, word for word, from beginning to end, Jian Wushuang finally raised his head and breathed deeply, with a hint of shock in his eyes. "How is it going?" Sima Bu asked. "Very good, especially the chapter on Sword Essence." Jian Wushuang nodded his head and said seriously, "When my father was teaching me swordsmanship, he mentioned Sword Essence. But I didn't understand what Sword Essence really indicated until now. I finally know that Sword Essence is formed by comprehending the essence of heaven and earth. Yes, in fact, it is a matter of understanding and using the natural power of heaven and earth. Watch this." Sima Bu said, then smiled and abruptly pulled out the saber at his waist, immediately attacking a rock that was several meters away. A sharp crack appeared on the rock and a large amount of rubble fell. "I didn't use the essences of heaven and earth just now. But now, I will try again with the essence of heaven and earth. Make sure you watch." Immediately, Sima Bu split the rock again. Jian Wushuang sensed a strong and fiery power this time when the rock was attacked. Was that the essence of heaven and earth? Jian Wushuang's heartbeat quickened. Pang! The rock shattered and a large amount of rubble fell. Jian Wushuang was astonished to see such a large difference. The difference was humongous. One attack only caused a crack in the rock while the other blew the entire rock into pieces. Is this the difference between a normal attack and an attack using the essence of heaven and earth? Jian Wushuang asked. That's right. The essences of heaven and earth are the powers of nature, which can be guided by both sword warriors and blade warriors. However, I have only mastered superficial knowledge. Otherwise, the power would have been much stronger, said Sima Bu. Actually, for warriors, they would try to master essences of heaven and earth after reaching the gold core realm. Once he mastered a hint of sword essence or blade essence, his strength would explode. Once, I met a super genius who was talented in swordsmanship, like you. At that time, he had just entered the gold core realm, but he had deep comprehension in 3 different sword essences at the same time, which helped him to kill an expert warrior at the exceptional gold core realm. What? Jian Wushuang was stunned. Everyone knows, the distance in power between each level only gets larger as their strength progresses. The distance between the initial gold core realm and the exceptional gold core realm was so large that even a genius who possessed a heaven-defying cultivation method, like the heavenly creation skill, still couldn't compare with someone at the exceptional gold core realm. However, because that exceptional genius reached a high level of understanding in sword essences, he was able to kill someone in the exceptional gold core realm with only one stroke. Just a single stroke. Sword essence is that terrifying? Jian Wushuang asked in shock. Your spiritual power is still too low to progress to the gold core realm, but after these few days, I noticed that you are very talented in swordsmanship. So, I decided to give you this book in the hope that you can learn sword essence earlier. It depends on whether you yourself can actually comprehend it, Sima Bu said. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. When he saw the chapter on sword essence, he knew there was a large difference: someone who comprehended the essences of heaven and earth and someone who did not. He was full of longing and expectation towards the essence realm of heaven and earth. And that chapter also introduced the methods for comprehending the essences of heaven and earth in great detail. Even after this day, Jian Wushuang continued searching and battling with powerful spirit beasts at the profound transforming sea realm and exceptional transforming sea realm in the dark forest. But obviously, he spent more time studying sword essence than he had previously. Inside an open canyon of the dark forest, Jian Wushuang stood alone with his eyes closed and his long sword held out. He had been holding this position for half an hour. With the breeze whisking by his body repeatedly, he quietly attempted to feel the power of the wind in the surrounding the area. The wind is invisible, but ubiquitous. Unexpectedly, the long sword in his hand began to sweep slowly upwards. Very slowly, very lightly, each move followed the strength of the wind that flowed in the surrounding area. With a trace of a smile on his face, Jian Wushuang very clearly sensed the power of the surrounding wind, as well as the lightness of the wind. Gradually, a trace of enlightenment grew in his heart as the speed of his sword increased. At this time, Sima Bu was sitting arbitrarily on a rock near the open space. Occasionally, Jian Wushuang would glance in his direction. This kid has begun to ponder sword essence, but is it so easy to comprehend? Sima Mabu shook his head and could not help laughing in the heart. One must know that to comprehend the blade essence of raging fire, he had ventured alone to a desolate and huge volcano. He lived there for a full 3 years, day and night, feeling the turbulent flames. Finally, he grasped a trace of the blade essence of raging fire, which was considered very lucky compared to the unfortunate experts in the gold core realm who worked hard their whole life without ever being able to feel a trace of the essence realm of heaven and earth. Even though Jian Wushuang was born with talent in sword principle, it would still take a long time for him to comprehend sword essence. But, at this moment... How is that possible? Sima Bu looked up unexpectedly, feeling completely astonished by what he was seeing. Jian Wushuang was still practicing his swordsmanship at this moment, but the speed of his sword gradually became surprisingly fast, so much that even Sima Bu could only see the flickering sword light. He is drawing his sword so quickly. And he is doing it freestyle, without using sword arts, ah. Sima Bu was shocked. He did not use sword arts to enhance the speed, like the Aurora sword art or flowing light sword art. He was just practicing freestyle, but it was still so fast. What does it mean? The sword flows with the wind becomes the sword. The sword principle of Gale. He comprehended it. Sima Bu was dumbstruck immediately. Note that it was only yesterday when he gave the book to Jian Wushuang. Also, he only learned of the existence of the essence realm of heaven and earth yesterday. Today he comprehended the sword principle of Gale from the essences of heaven and earth. What speed is that? Chapter 43. Chapter 43, Incredible Comprehension. Whoosh! Sword light flashed at an amazingly fast speed, just like a fish swimming in the water, shifting around naturally. It was quite a bit later when Jian Wushuang finally stopped practicing. Kid, I think I am beginning to understand why Blood Feather Tower chased you in such a crazy manner, Sima Bu said to him with a complex look on his face. To be honest, I have to admit that you are an exceptional genius. You have grasped the sword principle of Gale today even though you just learned of the essence realm of heaven and earth yesterday. Your talent completely outmatches the exceptional genius I mentioned to you earlier. If I'm not mistaken, although your natural talent is good, part of it must have to do with your awakening of the sword soul. Sword soul. Jian Wushuang felt a tremor in his heart, then nodded, quietly approving. Indeed, when practicing his swordsmanship, he also realized that something inside him helped him comprehend the essences of heaven and earth. Even though it was difficult for others, he could easily grasp the sword essence of Gale. But what was it inside him that helped him comprehend the essences of heaven and earth? Undoubtedly, it must be because of his sword soul awakening. Sword soul. Something that drove Blood Feather Tower to chase after him desperately. Naturally, it must be extraordinary. It was due to the sword's soul that he could immediately and swiftly comprehend a trace of the sword essence of Gale. Anyhow, I have already grasped a trace of the sword essence of Gale. With it, my swordsmanship should be several times or even dozens of times more skillful than before. Jian Wushuang thought with a bright look in his eyes. Only a trace of sword essence of Gale could easily make his sword several times faster once it was integrated into his swordsmanship. Such an increase in speed also helped sharpen his swordsmanship, greatly contributing to its piercing force. It would cause his level of swordsmanship to increase immensely. Let me test it against a spirit beast first. Jian Wushuang thought quietly. Shortly after, he fought with a huge iron-backed bear. Its force was extremely dreadful and absolutely the most formidable spirit beast in the exceptional transforming sea realm. If he had encountered this huge iron-backed bear before grasping a trace of the sword essence of Gale, Jian Wushuang would have had no choice but to flee in a disorderly manner. However, now he did not even show a trace of fear. Kill! After releasing a low howl, with his eyes blazing like torches, Jian Wushuang waved his sword. Sword light flashed out across the air for several meters before finally striking the huge body of the iron-backed bear directly. The sword light was so fleeting that the iron-backed bear didn't even realize its body had been injured at first. Instantly, a flood of fresh blood poured out from the sword scar on its body. Though the sword scar was nothing to its huge body and strong defense, it was definitely enough to enrage the iron-backed bear. Howl! The howl from the iron-backed bear's mouth echoed in the surroundings. Its two giant feet stamped on the ground as it made great strides towards Jian Wushuang. Every step forward produced a minor tremor. Go to hell, human! The dark golden eyes of the iron-backed bear were a bloody color and its desire to kill Jian Wushuang increased dramatically. Ha, come on! Jian Wushuang began to laugh loudly while moving his sword to fight against it. After a while, a cold and dazzling sword light directly penetrated its defense and plunged into its throat. Iron-backed bears are formidable in both power and defense, but their speed is very slow. Now that I have grasped a trace of the sword essence of Gale, I can easily surpass it in speed. There is no chance for it to resist against my absolute advantage in speed. Jian Wushuang smiled secretly. Iron-backed bears, the most formidable spirit beasts in the exceptional transforming sea realm. Now, they could easily be slain by Jian Wushuang. Continue. Next, the tests progressed forward as he battled one formidable spirit beasts after another. Such as purple crystal-winged lions, phantom foxes, gibbon-shaped wolverines, 9 poisons pythons and so on. The most formidable spirit beasts in the exceptional transforming sea realm became the opponents of Jian Wushuang and were eventually killed by him. Time flew by. It had already been 1 month since Jian Wushuang entered the dark forest. The dark forest covered an abundantly immense area, stretching across 2 provinces. Although he had already traveled for a month, Jian Wushuang still had a long way to go before he would reach the Tiannan province. With his hands crossed, in the darkness of the forest, Sima Bu gravely stared at Jian Wushuang, who was practicing his swordsmanship in front of him. In his eyes, he could clearly perceive that every one of Jian Wushuang's extremely heavy moves interacted and integrated with the earth. Sword essence of earth. He has just grasped a trace of the sword essence of Gale, but in less than a month after that, he seems to have also grasped the sword essence of Earth. Unbelievable, it's really unbelievable. It shocked Sima Bu to his core. It was really incredible for him to simultaneously grasp two kinds of sword essence within a month. However, this made Sima Bu much more curious about Sword Soul. What on earth is Sword Soul? And how did it create such a monster? It wasn't long before Jian Wushuang finished practicing his swordsmanship. Earth, warm and heavy. The sword essence of Earth is exactly like this. Jian Wushuang forced a smile and rejoiced. He himself didn't expect to grasp the sword essence as easily as he did today. He grasped sword principle of Gale earlier, but only 1 month later he had also grasped a trace of the sword essence of Earth. For his part, that must be the result of the sword soul. Great progress had been made in his swordsmanship in the past month. First, his cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th heaven of the divine path after 1 month's worth of life and death fighting and day and night cultivation. His current level was comparable to when he used the soul-taking secret skill to fight against Emo. At its peak, the 9th heaven of the divine path was equivalent to the exceptional transforming sea realm. Secondly, his swordsmanship, and especially his fighting experience, had made greater progress. Now, without a doubt, he was completely experienced in fighting. As for sword essence, he learned more tricks in the sword essence of Gale and became more skilled and flexible in the practice and use of sword essence. But more importantly, he also apprehended a trace of the sword essence of Earth just now. It must be acknowledged that he had grasped two different sword essences of nature in this short amount of time. Characterized by its flexibility and fastness, the sword essence of Gale could make sword arts and piercing force much more powerful. As for the sword essence of Earth, it was boundless and tremendous due to its heaviness and steadiness. If used perfectly and flexibly, these two sword essences could make his sword arts more dreadful and formidable. After a month of cultivating and fighting, I have killed numerous spirit beasts easily. Even the formidable spirit beasts in the exceptional transforming sea realm are not considered a threat to me, so. Exposing a cold look in his eyes, Jian Wushuang made a decision in his mind. Chapter 44. Chapter 44, Bloody Moon Devil Wolf. What? You are going to fight against spirit beasts in the Gold Core realm. Sima Bu looked at Jian Wushuang with astonishment. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Just as water naturally runs downhill, he aspired to fight against stronger spirit beasts, ones in the Gold Core realm, to practice his swordsmanship. It was a fact that spirit beasts in the exceptional transforming sea realm couldn't pose a threat to him. Despite the big difference between the Gold Core realm and transforming sea realm, Jian Wushuang was still confident in his strength. As we all know, the peak of the 9th heaven of the divine path could rival the spiritual power of the exceptional transforming sea realm. With his sword arts as well as the sword essences of both Gale and Earth, he had the ability to fight with spirit beasts in the Gold Core realm. Brother Bu, don't worry about me. With my current strength, I can fight against the weaker spirit beasts in the Gold Core realm. Even if I can't beat them, I can escape. If I can't escape, I can count on you, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. In the past 1 month, he got along well with Sima Bu, who always gave him references and guidance from nearby when he was fighting with spirit beasts. Jian Wushuang appreciated that very much. Alright, I still want to remind you that spirit beasts in the Gold Core realm are so powerful that you may be killed by them before I can help you out. You must be careful when you confront them, Sima Bu advised repeatedly. Certainly, I won't risk my life, said Jian Wushuang while smiling. Then he began to search for nearby spirit beasts at the Gold Core realm. Spirit beasts at the transforming sea realm in the dark forest were everywhere, but those in the Gold Core realm were rare. During the last month, they only met several spirit beasts at the Gold Core realm, and once meeting them, they chose to escape instead of fighting. Jian Wushuang searched for them for a long time, but he failed to find one at the Gold Core realm on the first day. However, he found a spirit beast already in the profound gold core realm the next day. Even though it was barely in the profound gold core realm, fighting against it was like playing with fire, so he decided to give up. Jian Wushuang didn't find a suitable spirit beast in the gold core realm to fight with until the third day. It's a bloody moon devil wolf. Staring at the more than 1 meter high, dark red devil wolf, whose whole body seemed to have been bathed in blood, Jian Wushuang desperately desired to fight it. Human beings. Just like Jian Wushuang, the dark red eyes of the bloody moon devil wolf also stared at him. Stronger spirit beasts are also much wiser. This bloody moon devil wolf in the gold core realm was as intelligent as a human being, so it could also feel Jian Wushuang's burning desire to fight. You, a small ant, who has not even reached the gold core realm, how dare you fight with me? Go to hell. With a sudden release of all his strength, the bloody moon devil wolf moved so fast that only a bloody shadow was left in the air. Wearing a serious look, Jian Wushuang used his long sword against the bloody moon devil wolf right when its shadow flashed. Jian Wushuang used a mysterious angle to both stab and block the shadow of the bloody moon devil wolf as soon as its dark red shadow emerged. Immediately, an angry howl was released by the bloody moon devil wolf, accompanied by a wave of sound, easily bouncing his long sword back. What? Jian Wushuang said with astonishment. A mere howl was able to deflect his sword art. Aurora sword art. After a cold humph, Jian Wushuang released all his strength and produced many sword shadows at almost the same time. His sword arts, mixed with a trace of sword principle of gale, made the sword shadows flash at lightning speed. Thump, thump, thump. The sky was almost filled with the whistling sword light. The bloody moon devil wolf suddenly attacked Jian Wushuang with its extremely sharp claws, which seemed to be able to split the void in two. Pang! Instantly, all the sword shadows disappeared. At the same time, a formidable force was released from the bloody moon devil wolf and transmitted to Jian Wushuang through his long sword, causing him to shiver unconsciously. It's so powerful that its force alone is enough to block me. Jian Wushuang looked serious. Watch out, yelled Sima Bu, who was watching and standing in a nearby treetop. Jian Wushuang instantly noticed that the bloody moon devil wolf had already opened its mouth, showing its sharp and bloody fangs, and was preparing to bite off his head. Fuck off. Along with an angry shout, Jian Wushuang moved his triple kill sword to generate a kind of heavy boundlessness. He integrated sword essence into his attack and used the sword essence of earth to angrily chop at the bloody moon devil wolf, finally making it step back. Anonymous sword art, blood shadow. With his eyes full of killing intent, Jian Wushuang instantly performed the first move of the anonymous sword arts. His use of the anonymous sword art was more powerful after grasping sword essence. The cold and sharp sword light flashed quickly as the bloody moon devil wolf abruptly lunged at him. Ding! A low crash sounded. Then, Jian Wushuang tried to stabilize his body after being repelled. Sword killing movement. Jian Wushuang released his most powerful killing blow without any hesitation. Showing an angry look in its dark red eyes, the bloody moon devil wolf suddenly stretched out its cold and sharp claws. Clang! A low metal sound crashed, then there was a huge sword scar on the bloody moon devil wolf's paw, from which blood continuously poured out. After staring at Jian Wushuang with its dark red eyes, it shrank down into a blood shadow and fled directly into the jungle, where it disappeared. It escaped. While looking in the direction the bloody moon devil wolf fled, Jian Wushuang withdrew his long sword and displayed a strange expression. Kid, are you okay? Sima Bu came over to him and asked. I'm fine. Jian Wushuang shook his head, but he couldn't help looking at his right hand that was holding his long sword. Actually, he still felt a shiver in his palm. It is worthy of being called a gold core realm spirit beast, it's much more powerful than me. Though I wounded it with my sword-killing movement during the fight, it also hurt me with the formidable power from its paws, Jian Wushuang murmured. Kid, you did quite well. You repelled it by using your sword arts. As a spirit beast at the Gold Core realm, it is definitely more powerful than you, Sima Bu said. Still not good enough. Jian Wushuang said without any sense of satisfaction. My swordsmanship still needs to improve, and I'm not flexible enough when using the sword principles of both Gale and Earth. If I could use the third move of the anonymous sword arts, or perfectly combine the sword principles of Gale and Earth, integrating one into the other, I wouldn't have panicked in that fight. Alright, let's continue like this. Jian Wushuang continued practicing his swordsmanship while heading towards his destination. Time flew and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang and Sima Bu had spent 4 months walking through the dark forest before they finally reached the other side.